Hello, everyone. It is Friday, the 15th of November, 2024. We have a full moon in Taurus. And yesterday, I was so much into the research regarding electricity, regarding magnetism, because people within the Truth community, I believe that they're brilliant, but they are not unpacking magnetism and its impact on this cosmos as in as much depth as I believe there could be the potential for. And so I've looked in the works of people like Rudolf Steiner in the past, and I've shared his works, and some things I agree with and some things I disagree with. And the same thing with Max Heindel, who was a student and someone that worked with and around Rudolf Steiner as well. And they discussed not just esotericism, but electricity and magnetism and how it impacts not only us and our auras and our fields, but any essentially sentient being or life force within this cosmos, also profoundly impacted by these two energies or forces that work synergistically together and are impacted by things like temperature, pressure, and density. And anyway, so I read almost the whole book. It's an online book, and I think that what I'm going to do is, instead of reading it out loud, I'm going to actually, before I even get into that, I want to share some various maps from the early 1900s, isogonic charts, and how these are magnetic fields or currents, whatever you want to call it, that were utilized in order to navigate on the seas. And we do the same thing with aircrafts in the sky with different, like, tailwinds is what they call it, or etc. And so I do believe it is a force. It's not just electricity or electrostatics like people want to believe. That create this cosmos. Magnetism is absolutely its own force. Anyway, I wanted to show a few other things as well. I'll get into the Hoya flower and how it is, how roses developed from the Hoya flower, a 5-pointed or 5-petaled flower that Heindel also speaks about. And he also mentions things like starfish, also having the 5 points, but he doesn't mention humans. And so that's interesting because we are also, again, we have the 5 points, whatever you want to call it, with our head, 2 arms, 2 legs. And I don't want to ruin too much of it. But in how the rose symbolizes or represents, I believe, the electromagnetic fields, these fields that make up this earth plane when you have a top-down view. And Ken Wheeler has these electromagnetic fields that he demonstrates on his videos. And he's called Theoria Apophasis online. And so take a look at that. It very much looks like possibly like a rose, like a 2-dimensional rose when you're looking at it, a top-down view. And the same thing with lotus flowers, like I've talked about before. And when you're accessing your higher chakras or your higher energy systems or energy bodies, then there's more fields or more petals. And this is not by accident. This is very much in plain sight, letting us know what's going on with the world. And I'm looking for it. Is it this one? No. Where did it go? Seriously, is it this? There we go. Okay. So this is from a student, not named, and it's Etheric Visions and what it reveals. This was very interesting. And again, I went through almost the entire text yesterday, but I want to share it with everyone.
Forward. 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 The material in this booklet is a reprint, with some revisions and additions, of monthly lessons sent out by the Rosicrucian Fellowship to its members, and is a summary of studies and researches conducted by the students in the esoteric section of the fellowship. The conclusions reached, as is often the case in scientific investigations, may have to be revised in the light of future developments and work. Although Max Heindel had not completed his researches in the ethers at the time of his passing in January 1919, he left a substantial foundation, and what he gave is standing up well under the impact of even the latest scientific findings. He stated many times that the Brothers of the Rose Cross work through scientists and with science.
Hey, Tony.
They do not limit their activities to students and probationers of the Rosicrucian Fellowship, nor to any other specific group. This is an endeavor for all humanity, pointing toward the actual establishment of universal brotherhood on our earth. The Western wisdom teachings were given in a basic form through Max Heindel. A basic physical science come forth through academic representatives. Mankind, consciously and unconsciously, are preparing for the Aquarian Age, when science will be religious and religion scientific. Meanwhile, each aspirant must add his 1. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Small bit to the ever-extending coral reef of knowledge. Max Heindel has intimated that when the Aquarian Age dawns, some 600 years from now, or perhaps before that, a new teacher will appear who will sum up in himself and his teachings the composite wisdom of our entire past evolution. This great teacher of the Aquarian Age, he intimates again, will be the reappearance of that ego who was known in Europe as Christian Rosencreuz, and again as the Count Saint Germain who, he believes, may have been one of his last public incarnations. In addition to the teacher of the Aeon, however, a messenger is also sent out once each century from the invisible government of the world, called in occultism the Great White Lodge. Occultists everywhere now agree that between the present year, 1965, and the year 2000, or shortly thereafter, one of these teachers will come forward. The direction of his teachings we may know by the trends of our time, universalism in science and religion, preparing for the one world of Aquaria, under the banner of the Christ, and the thrust outward into interstellar space and new cosmic adventures for the human spirit, and a truly cosmic philosophy to go with it. Man's immediate utopia is no mere city on Earth's surface, nor any of Earth's lands, but the whole living universe, through which the mystic hears the rushing of the wings of God and the unceasing song of His word. Contents. Part ITHE Chemical Ether. ITHE Nature of Etheric Sight. In 1918 Max Heindel wrote, "The process of preparation for the Aquarian Age has already commenced, and as Aquarius is an airy, scientific, intellectual sign, it is a foregone conclusion that the new faith must be rooted in reason and able to solve the riddle of life and death in a manner that will satisfy both the mind and the religious instinct. As we have in the past evolved 5 senses by means of which we contact the present visible world, so shall we in the far distant future evolve another sense which will enable us to see the denizens of the etheric region, including those of our dear ones who have left the physical body and inhabit the ether and lower desire world during the first stage of their career in the spiritual realms. Aquarius is an airy sign having special rule over the ethers. The flood which sank the ancient continent of Atlantis, which is the Noachian deluge of the Bible, dried the air to a degree by depositing most of the moisture it held into the sea, but when the sun enters Aquarius by precession, still more of the moisture will be eliminated and the visual vibrations which are most easily transmitted by the dry etheric atmosphere will become more intense, and thus conditions will become more intense, and thus conditions will be more particularly conducive to production of the slight extension of our present sight necessary to open our eyes to the etheric region. California's production of psychics is an instance of this effect of a dry, electric atmosphere, although of course it is not nearly so dry as the air of the Aquarian Age will be. But it is well to realize that through aspiration and meditation those who are longingly looking for that day are taking time by the forelock, and may quite easily outstrip their fellows who are unaware of what is in store. The latter, on the other hand, may delay development of the extended vision by the belief that they are suffering from hallucinations when they begin to get their first glimpse of the etheric entities, and the fear that if they tell others what they see they will be judged insane. Contents. 2. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Therefore the Rosicrucian Fellowship has been charged by the Elder Brothers with the mission of promulgating the gospel of the Aquarian Age, to conduct a campaign of education and enlightenment so that the world may be prepared for what is in store. The world must be leavened with these ideas. 1. Conditions in the land of the living dead are not shrouded in mystery, but knowledge of them is as available as knowledge concerning foreign countries from the tales of travelers. 2. We stand close to the threshold where we shall know these truths, and 3. Most important of all, we shall hasten the day in our own case by acquiring knowledge of the facts concerning the post-mortem existence and the things we may expect to see, for then we shall know what to look for and will be neither frightened, astonished, nor incredulous when we commence to obtain glimpses of these things. However, wonderful as these developments are, and because they are wonderful, a responsibility attends them. Students should realize that a serious responsibility goes with the possession of knowledge, for to whom much is given, of him much shall be required, and if we bury our talent, may we not expect a merited condemnation? The Rosicrucian Fellowship can fulfill its mission only in so far as each member does his duty in spreading the teachings and in living the life, and therefore it is to be hoped that this may serve to call attention of students to the fact of their individual duty. But let there be no misunderstanding on the nature of this duty. We are not appointed to build up a powerful organization, with great wealth, imposing buildings, and hundreds of thousands of dues-paying members. Our duty is simply to spread the truths pertaining to the New Age, in such wise as circumstances may determine. We do not have to mention the word Rosicrucian nor the Rosicrucian Fellowship, but if we are asked as to the source of our knowledge, then it is our privilege, as well as our duty, to speak the truth, and to give our spiritual background. And of course we should not force our views upon unwilling ears. Mental hospitals today are full of cases of so-called nervous and mental breakdowns, which are in fact nothing else than persons suffering from exposure to psychic forces which they do not understand, and as a result of which they are nervously and emotionally exhausted and go in deadly fear. These conditions are caused by the overstimulation of the great nerve center of the solar plexus, before the higher centers in the brain have come into play sufficiently to extend a measure of control. We touch upon this issue only in passing, as a symptom of the sensitization which occurs as the Aquarian age approaches. It is not only the solar plexus which receives such stimulation from cosmic forces, but other nerve centers, also, including the optic nerve and the brain areas having to do with vision, which in this case is the extended vision pertaining to the etheric region. Etheric sight ordinarily depends upon the sensitiveness of the optic nerve, but even when the optic nerve is defective or destroyed, it may be that etheric vision can be developed through the use of substitute nerve channels. We are told that much of the defective vision found among us today is due to the increasing densification of the ethers, which is part of the overall effect of the solar radiation when the sun nears Aquarius at the vernal equinox by precession. By means of etheric sight it is possible to see everything that exists in the etheric region of the physical world. When this vision first develops, it reveals the lowest, or chemical ether, which varies from gray blue, through blue, to violet, or a dark blue that is almost black. Max Heindel speaks of the chemical ether as dark, almost black. Because of the interplay or intermingling of the other ethers in the chemical ether, this ether may also seem to be reddish blue, magenta, violet, or purple, according to the density of the ethers. When anyone views an object with etheric sight, he sees through the object in a manner similar to the way an X-ray penetrates solid substance. It is therefore called X-ray vision, although this is by no means an accurate description. In viewing an object with etheric vision, the seer sees first the outer part, then the next. Contents. 3. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Adjacent part, and finally on through to the farther side of the object. One may have higher grades of sight, desire world vision, mental, etc., and yet not have etheric sight. By means of etheric sight one can see through books, papers, letters, wall, or anything else for a short distance. In the Aquarian age, when many will have etheric sight, it will be extremely easy to study anatomy and to detect a morbid growth, a dislocation, or a pathological condition of the body, for with this vision the doctor will be able to study directly both anatomical structures and physiological processes without hindrance. As the New Age advances, the masses will develop etheric sight, and with this widespread development it will be largely impossible for one to live a double life and to act differently in the home than one does in public. Were we aware now of the invisible entities thronging our houses, we should often feel ashamed of the things we do and say. The various kinds of entities filling the air are attracted to people who are of like nature with themselves, whether good or evil, and these entities are low on the path of evolution and have not the intelligence to retain a disguise very long at a time, but must, sooner or later, expose their true inner quality. But whether seen or unseen, the invisible etheric entities feed on the life ether of the person to whom they are attracted, if they are permitted to linger in the aura. Consequently, they not only tend to influence such persons toward evil, but they also weaken their vital body, and this leads to such cases of nerve exhaustion as result in partial possession or obsession. It is as impossible to rid the aura of such entities without a complete moral and emotional cleansing as to stamp out malaria without draining the swamps and pools where the malaria mosquito breeds. Where the atmosphere is full of such entities, revealing unerringly the condition of psychic and mental uncleanness of those who entertain them, and when in the New Age virtually everyone has the power to see them, there will be no way of hiding what our prevailing character may be. There will be no privacy which may not be broken into by anyone who desires to see us. It will avail nothing that we send the office boy or maid out to tell an unwelcome visitor that we are not in. This means that in the New Age honesty and straightforwardness will be the only worthwhile policy, for we cannot then do wrong and hope to escape detection. There will be people whose wickedness of character lead them in the ways of wickedness then as now, but they will at least be marked so that they may be avoided. Concerning etheric vision, Max Heindel says further, MS 591-2 experience has proved that the afflicted stellar ray from certain parts of the zodiac already mentioned interferes with the etheric vibration sensed by the retina of the eye, and thus impairs the physical sight. If, in the same figure, Neptune is focused through one of these places, the so-called yellow spot, which is blocked.
Okay, I'm going to try to pause it. I hope it doesn't mess it up. But I did want to reiterate that I believe that when Heindel's talking about a globe, I believe that he's talking about the toroidal fields and hyperboloids that make up like the this contained environment, like these like the radiation fields, these radiation belts, whatever you want to call them, is what contains this environment, and the shape that it makes could be possibly seen as some kind of a globe. And but the Earth plane itself is being projected on a flat plane of inertia, how we experience this Earth plane, this cosmos. And so, yeah, I don't know if within his esoteric teachings he was taught the true reality of the world, but if not, it could have benefited him greatly had he had that information.
Blind because sensitized by the spiritual ray of Neptune, i.e. the spinal spirit fire, and thus it may be that a person physically nearsighted, or even blind, may view the spiritual worlds hidden from people whose sight is focused by mercurial vibrations, in the nerves ruled by Mercury. And again, letters to students p.82 we do not see physical objects outside the eye *, they are reflected in the retina, and we see only their image inside the eye.
Excuse me.
As light is the agent of reflection, objects which resist the passage of light appear opaque. Other substances, like glass, seem clear because they admit light rays readily. When the spiritual sight is used, light of superlative intensity is generated inside the body between the pituitary body and the pineal gland. It is focused through the so-called blind spot in the eye directly upon the object to be investigated. The scope of the direct ray is entirely different from the range of the reflected physical ray. It penetrates a wall without difficulty. Recent findings seem to suggest that the function of the retina is more analytical and selective than was formerly believed, but this does not affect the correctness of the above in reference to etheric sight. Contents. 4. Etheric vision and what it reveals. 2. The chemical ether in the human body. The etheric region of the Earth's planetary envelope is part and parcel of the physical Earth itself. It is no spiritual except in the sense that the entire living universe is the expression of God's beauty and wisdom. It is commonly called the lowest of the invisible spirit regions, and etheric sight is also called the lowest form of spiritual sight. Lowest it may be, but it reveals a world lying just beyond the borderline of physical sight, magical to those fortunate enough to gaze upon it. There are several kinds of vision besides the physical which belongs to the normal human eye. We have said that etheric vision depends in part upon the sensitization of the optic nerve. It depends also on a certain degree of looseness between the etheric body and the physical. In primitive races, this looseness of the etheric body results in entire populations having a degree of etheric vision, so that the existence of fairies and spirits is never doubted, and magic, both white and black, flourishes. Such people are so responsive to psychic force projected at them by occult practitioners that they have been known to lie down and die from no discernible physical cause. This condition is due to the etheric body being pushed out, in whole or in part, from the physical body, as occurs also in the process of hypnosis. We know of one instance where one person, holding the hand of a girl belonging to a more primitive race, by a little effort of concentration, and without intending it, drove the etheric double out of the girl's hand and arm, which became cold, clammy, and inert. This girl was highly intelligent, showing that looseness of the etheric body does not infer weakness of intellect in these primitive races. In fact, they are often very bright mentally. Hypnotism should not be confused with mesmerism or magnetism. There are real magnetic currents which flow through the vital body, visible as radiating lines of force, and which can be sensed as electrical in nature. Concentrated by an effort of will, they become dense and almost physically tangible. Many persons have seen what they call magnetic rain in the atmosphere. This fall of magnetic force is not the same as the cosmic rays of modern physics, however. It is susceptible to control by the human will which, so far as presently known, the cosmic rays are not and can be directed in various ways. The magnetic forces have some connection with the biological life process. It is not merely electromagnetism, although it is quite obviously capable of acting in that area, as shown in the laboratory experiments where nerve currents have been proved to be a form of electricity. Occult science has shown long before physical science entered the field that the forces which run through the nervous system are electromagnetic in nature, and that their diminution or blockage may result in paralysis. It is this magnetic aura which modern biology is exploring, within which every organ of the body has its positive and negative pole, and some, like the heart, having more than one set of poles. The heart has been found to have 12 poles, alternating negative and positive. Again, it is this magnetic.
The heart is also possibly some type of a spiral shape, right? Like when you can actually fold it out, and it's folded into itself. If that makes any sense. And I just wanted to also share. Let me stop the screen. I hope it doesn't mess anything up. I just washed my hair this morning. It takes like 10 hours to dry because I try to air dry and not use a blow dryer. Anyway, why did I say that? Because no one likely cares. I wanted to share just some images of magnetic fields, toroidal fields, just to give you a view. I've already shared these before on videos. In fact, I think even a thumbnail was this specific image that I'm showing. But this is just to show you the top-down view, like a top view of magnetic fields, side views. I believe that it's we've got belts, or yeah, it's more like this, but sideways. Flip it. Let's see here. Other images of toroidal fields and hyperboloids, showing that we also have our own electromagnetic fields. It's very interesting too that within our chest cavity as well, just like an apple, when you open it up, we have these two different distinct hemispheres or sections, and I believe it's the same thing that applies to the earth. Nope, got the L. Yeah. Anyway. This was so interesting to me.
Magnetic aura which binds the molecules of the body into their organic patterns, and the invisible helper is sometimes aware of streams of magnetism flowing through the inner planes when he awakens out of the body at night. Many persons who have developed a small degree of etheric sight have expressed astonishment when first beholding showers of stars, pyramids, double pyramids, cubes and other geometrical forms issuing from the body. Such figures are the cast-off molecules of which his body is composed and which are being excreted through the action of the radiating vital forces of the etheric body. Students who are interested in making an analysis of these figures may consult scientific magazines and books in which the molecular structure of matter is indicated. Here they will find that each molecule has its own characteristic atomic structure, which occult investigators have been describing under another terminology. 5. 2. The chemical ether in the human body. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Note that these microscopic crystals seem to have actual size and shape to the etheric vision. Sometimes they appear in large clusters. We can understand from this why the seers were not at first able to explain what they saw in terms of laboratory science. This has not been possible until our own 20th century, with its development of atomic and nuclear physics. In occult science, the chemical, life, light, and reflecting ethers correspond to the four classic elements: fire, earth, air, and water. As mentioned before, no doubt a new table will have to be constructed to accommodate the new science of our day, but for the layman the old classification is still usable. The chemical ether, corresponding to the element earth, is that ether through which forces act to sustain and nourish the body. This process includes eliminating what is not good for the body, and the elimination takes place by means of forces acting through the negative pole of the chemical ether, as we read in the Cosmo conception, whereas the upbuilding and nourishing forces act through the positive pole. When food has been digested and has entered the bloodstream, it is visible to the etheric vision as a mass of ether which flows along magnetic lines of force. Without this etheric counterpart of the chemical elements found in the physical bloodstream, the food we eat would do no good to the body. There are points deep within the body where to etheric vision the blood seems to be almost wholly gaseous, but biological science of course has found no evidence of this at the present time, partly because the biologist does not expect to find such a condition and partly because his instruments are not adequate to its discovery. The gaseous aspect of the blood could be discovered only in a living, unmutilated body. X-rays cannot show it, nor can any of the other rays now in the hands of the physicist. Poisons which build up in the bloodstream are visible to etheric sight as black miasma which hangs in curls from the afflicted parts. To the etheric sense of touch, this black miasma feels heavy, and in fact, the heavy feeling which accompanies illness is in part due to the accumulation of large masses of black ether in the body. Water carries much of it away, which is the reason that baths give a feeling of lightness and resiliency, but when the body is sick it continues to generate these poisonous ethers, which then obstruct the passage of the clean solar magnetism or solar ether as it is called.
Yeah.
This is particularly true of the center at the root of the nose,
He means solar radiation,
which becomes clogged with miasma to a
or solar magnetism.
degree, and when through spiritual healing and the etheric manipulation of the invisible helper this clogging is broken up, there is an immediate improvement. The dense miasma in the vital body also has a part in obstructing the opening of etheric vision by slowing down the action of etheric vision by slowing down the action of the etheric force centers. Coincident with the densification of the ethers into a black miasma, the rest of the vital body becomes attenuated, for the physical body is drawing upon it just as in starvation the stored fat is drawn upon, leaving the body to become emaciated. Actual holes develop in the etheric structure, showing that energy is not being specialized by the vital body. It is at once apparent that the black miasma belongs to the chemical ether, which normally, as indicated before, varies in color from blue-gray, through blue-violet, to a blue so dark as to be almost black, depending upon the density of the ethers. Various persons have seen this ether lying like a blue glove upon the hand, as a blue envelope in which the body is embedded, and as blue fuzzy flames, like a low gas flame, appearing along wall surfaces. Now physicists have shown photographs of free electrons, and these free electrons have the appearance of blue flames, not perhaps exactly as described by persons having etheric vision, but something similar, and suggesting that the chemical ether does, in all probability, consist of atomic particles existing in a state yet undiscovered by physical science, not electron.
Yeah, radiating, ionized, I don't know what we would call it, energy bodies that make up our body. I think it's going to be in this book where he talks about carbon as well, and it being essential, and the different and what differentiates living beings, including plant life, etc., living beings from non-living materials or cells, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, that's another rabbit hole. Very interesting. And then just the structure of carbon and how strong it is, and again the correlation with the 5 points and the Hoya flower connection with that, and how again carbon is required in order for life to exist or be experienced via time and space drastically different than what we're being told by people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and these other liars, deceivers, pseudoscientists. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Electrons alone, but an amalgam of particles. This chemical ether would be a kind of light plasma, as shown in Max Heindel's description of the etheric food stream moving in or with the blood asterisk. A great many people see the dots in the air, which seem to be gold or silver dust, or sometimes 2. The chemical ether in the human body. 6. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Multicolored, and which sometimes move in great cloud-like masses before the vision. Ancient seers have described these clouds, out of which the spirits of the ancestors would condense and materialize before the physical eyes. This is again a view of the chemical ether, as it appears in materialization from etheric to physical formation. Asterisk. The word plasma has several definitions in today's science. 1. Blood plasma, the liquid part of the blood used in blood transfusions. 2.
Sorry, it's connection with I think I said with the 5-sided structure. I meant to say 6-sided structure, hexagon, and on the periodic table, the atomic number 6. I've mentioned that before. Electron configuration showing me. Anyway, maybe I'll share it with you. I'm way too close to the screen right now. Here we go. Yeah, because when you look inside here, 1, 2, 3, 5. There's 5. There's 6 points anyway. And when it's pressurized and heated, it becomes diamond. And pressure, temperature, and density. I've talked about when you remove electrons from the gases such as oxygen, hydrogen, and helium, and how the Van Allen belts, or the radiation belts that contain this environment, that it's ionized gases, and more specifically the lighter ones like hydrogen and helium. And people are trying to claim that that's coming from outer space. It's not. This is a contained environment, just like the laws of energy or laws of physics would state and stipulate that gases, you can't have a pressurized gaseous environment without some form of container to contain it in reference being like propane gas that are in tanks.
Two, a condition of matter in a molten state at high temperatures in which it becomes abnormally conductive of electricity.
That's very interesting.
3. A highly ionized gas, which produces a rosy glow, as seen in a stellarator, and is a medium in which radio waves can have a phase velocity greater than the speed of light in that medium. When microwaves are sent through the plasma of ionized gas, the increase in velocity is a measure of the density of the free electrons. 4. Astronomers, similarly to definition 3, describe a sort of magnetic cloud in interplanetary space in which positive and negative particles are suspended, but the cloud as a Whole is neutral in charge. 3. And 4. Approach states which the occultist refers to as etheric. 3 atoms and molecules. Without entering upon a discussion of it, the first multicolored, and which sometimes move in grid. 2. 3. And
I won't touch it anymore.
4. Approach states which the occultist refers to as etheric. 3 atoms and molecules. Without entering upon a discussion of atomic structure, which in any case demands specialized knowledge, it is evident that a rough correlation can be worked out as between the 4 ethers and the various atomic forces presently known. The greatest part of the mass of the atom resides in the nucleus, which consists of a complex of forces or particles. The heaviest are first the proton, weighing 1,836 times as much as the electron, and then the neutron, which as its name suggests is neither positive nor negative. Protons and neutrons alike are called nucleons because they are a part of the nucleus. Still smaller particles have been discovered, some in the nucleus and some falling through space. Scientists are searching among these for the binder of the nucleus, which as we have seen is not wholly positive as was originally believed, since it actually consists of more than just the positively charged proton. The first popularly accepted model of the atom as compared with the sun and planets is also now challenged. According to this first concept, the proton stood in the place of the sun, positively charged, and the electrons circulated around the proton like planets around the sun. The electrons are negative in charge. Now it is suggested that quite possibly, since the electron acts like a wave as well as a particle, and is described as a bundle of energy, the electron may in reality be a wave which completely encircles the central nucleus, with its complex of particles and forces. However, while there are several diagrammatic schemes, or models to represent atomic structure, all stand in need of verification. It may be that the old solar system model may still have its use. We note further that the physicist says that the Earth's aura of electrons extends out to the Moon, which is therefore within the Earth's electronic atmosphere. This is an obvious restating of the occultist's maxim that the etheric body of the Earth extends to and includes the Moon, and is the channel for continued magnetic interaction between the Moon and the Earth, especially as impinging upon and influencing growth of living. 3 atoms and molecules. 7. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Organisms on the Earth. The etheric vision reveals both molecules and atoms and the forces locked up within the atoms, and other forces and particles. Occult scientists have described them as best they could, but their vocabulary is not the vocabulary of modern science, and until a nuclear physicist develops the etheric vision or an occult scientist schools himself in nuclear physics, students will have a difficult time in equating their occult knowledge with modern physics and chemistry. A few scientists have admitted to the possession of extrasensory perception. Kekule, the discoverer of the benzene ring, saw the structure of molecules in a dream, or something he calls a dream. He says, "The atoms began to play antics before mine eyes. I saw how 2 smaller ones often united to form a pair, how the 2 larger ones seized 2 of the smaller ones, and how the still larger held 3 or even 4 of the smaller, and how they all moved in vortices. I saw how the greater formed a row, and how the smaller were drawn along at the side of the chain. I spent the night transferring to paper at least sketches of each of these dream pictures. Thus arose the structure theory. The benzene theory had a similar origin. The atoms again played antics before mine eyes. Small groups kept themselves modestly in the background. My mind's eye, trained by repeated sights of a similar kind, now distinguished larger forms of various shapes. Long rows united, becoming much thicker, all in a movement snake-like and turning. And see, what was that? One of the snakes seizes his own tail. I awoke as by a flash of lightning. This time also I spent the remainder of the night working out the consequences of the hypothesis." Max Heindel has said in many places that the great hierophants of the mystery schools are working with the modern scientist, and that they have always worked with scientists in the past, with the alchemists, for example, during the Middle Ages. Here is a sample of inner plane help given to a modern scientist, whose standing is unchallenged. Other scientists also have been helped by their budding clairvoyance. Usually it is purely intellectual in nature, an illumined reason, but occasionally one does, for a brief moment, see with etheric vision into the atomic structure of matter, but dares not publish this to the world. What is the relationship of molecules and atoms to the magnetic aura of which the occultist speaks and which science is now beginning to explore? Here we stand on the threshold of the second of the four ethers, the life ether. Before proceeding further, however, let us review what we are taught in the Rosicrucian philosophy about our planet's own etheric envelope. The etheric envelope of the human organism is in fact a miniature replica of the etheric envelope of the Earth globe, and is representative of it in the way that a drop of sea water may be said to represent the ocean. The physical Earth is surrounded and penetrated by an invisible globe which extends out into space a great distance beyond the atmosphere, traditionally, to the Moon, which is included within the etheric envelope of the Earth. This is the vital body of the Earth. This globe is composed of ether, of which there are 4 grades. The densest is called the chemical ether, and is closest to the Earth. The next is the life ether, then comes the light ether.
I go on all these tangents because I like to, and so I just wanted to share you more on the like the significance of the of 5 points. Hexagons, obviously, like incredibly symbolic, and so is the 5 point. Okay, the golden spiral and pentagons in nature. So more 5-sided fun. Because again, I think that we're 5-sided as well. Okay, where do I want to start here? It is often described as nature and art in perfect harmony. Like the phenomenon that is based on pentagonal mathematics. It is often described as nature and art in perfect harmony, where the golden ratio and pentagonal shapes are closely linked. It's model. Okay, no, it says it's a model. See, that's why I'm going to get someone else to read this thing after. It's a model. This model has inspired people for centuries. Many artists have woven the golden spiral in their work, creating a visual sense of harmony and aesthetic balance that resonates with people. Here's the secret sauce, is what they're saying. So anyway, this is an example of it. And just like the carbon molecule, or whatever you want to say as well, it goes like within it. There's 5 sides, and then it turns into 6 points. But anyway, the golden rule is when a regular pentagon is inscribed in a circle, the square in the circle, the pentagon in the circle. These are very symbolic also in certain esoteric groups. The ratio of the circle's diameter to the pentagon's side length is the golden ratio, approximately 1.618. I've shared this before in other videos, and I've gotten further into it if you want to take a look. The golden spiral concept can be seen in various natural phenomena, such things as a spiral arrangement of sunflower seeds and even the shape of what they're saying galaxies. And again, this is a contained environment. We don't know what space or reality is beyond this. We can guess and theorize, but pentagons in nature. The pentagon's charm means it doesn't have to be perfect to be a perfect geometrical form. Pentagons are found all around us in the natural world. One of the most obvious examples would be any of the numerous 5-petaled flowers, things such as the cherry blossom or apple blossom. These natural wonders demonstrate the harmony and balance found in pentagonal structures. It's another sign that nature really is amazing, naturally creating and using these shapes. Starfruit. Pentagons hold spiritual significance for several cultures, often representing harmony, unity, and the interconnectedness of things. Not really a surprise, given what we know about the golden spiral and the way our brains are hardwired to this aesthetic. The pentagon is associated with the concept of phi, the golden ratio, mentioned above. Also the 5 elements, earth, air, fire, water, and what I like to call ether, what they're calling spirit. Intricate patterns of pentagons can be found in ancient architecture and religious symbols worldwide, from the mesmerizing Islamic geometric tiles to the mystical pentagonal designs in Celtic art. Here are 9 of the most famous pieces of art that feature pentagons. Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci. I've mentioned this, heard this one before. Penrose Stairs. Pope Innocent X by Francis Bacon, who also possibly wrote the King James Version of the Bible, or translated it, and published in 1611. And again, it's owned by Cambridge, and also it's owned by the monarchy, such as right now it's King Charles owns the rights to it. And yeah. A lot of pentagons in here. Anyway, back to the book. It's sort of like an audio book. Nope, that's me. Hilarious. Is it this one? Nope. How am I not finding it anymore? There we go.
Ether, and finally, the fourth and rarest, most attenuated, which is called the reflecting ether. Ether is substantial, but not physical in the sense that matter as we know it is physical. However, to the trained clairvoyant it is as tangible as the solids, liquids, and gases of our common experience. In these ethers the clairvoyant sees the vital forces which give life to the mineral forms of plant, animal, and man. The etheric bodies of all beings that exist on the earth partake of the cosmic forces which flow through the planetary vital body. 3 atoms and molecules. 8. Etheric vision and what it reveals. The vital body has no power of itself. It is the channel through which the solar life forces pout into the physical body, and also it is the channel through which the dynamic energy of the desire body acts upon the physical to stir it to activity. The vital body determines the direction in which a given force is used, but that force must be supplied from outside or from above, if we are thinking in terms of the higher spiritual, mental, and psychic forces. Just as the Earth's envelope has its positive and negative poles in each sheath or layer from chemical to reflecting ether, reflected at the physical level as the magnetic poles of the Earth globe, so each sheath or level of man's etheric body has its positive and negative pole, manifesting in opposite polarity in the two sexes. The chemical ether is predominantly positive in the male structure, negative in the female. The organs of the physical body have each their own magnetic field within the etheric body in general, each with at least one pair of poles, and some with more than one. We have shown that the chemical ether is the medium of manifestation for the chemical forces which cause the formation of crystals, poetically explained as the loves and hates of atoms. Other forces in this ether promote assimilation, excretion, and growth. The color of the chemical ether is deep purplish, or indigo, sometimes amethystine or bluish violet, clear and transparent in its normal state, but dark to blackness when it carries disease, and when it is called miasma. Miasma is so dense that it is actually tangible even to persons without any particular occult development. Max Heindel described a case of illness in which black miasma enclosed the throat of the patient like a collar. He also described it as hanging in curls from the body, in the form in which it exuded from the magnetic atomic vortices of the vital body of the afflicted person. The forces which act through and in the chemical ether will be described in a future discourse. We may say in passing, however, that these forces include living intelligences, a class of nature spirits, generally called gnomes in the fairy mythology of the peoples, and other higher intelligences which direct their activities, among them angels and the human spirits of those whom we call dead. Asterisk. In common speech it is sometimes customary to speak of magnetism when what is really meant is the ether of the vital body itself. Magnetic healers speak of throwing off magnetism when they mean that diseased ethers are drawn off from the vital body of the patient and thrown down. This is not scientifically correct, as the student will understand from our discussion of the two lower ethers, but it is a common phrase and should be understood in its popular sense. Thus Max Heindel says that this miasma, when drawn from the patient's body, is subject to gravity and can be burned in a fire or carried away by water. To the spiritual
gravity.
vision, it is a dark or black jelly-like fluid. It lies shimmering and shivering on the floor. If now the patient gets up relieved, and goes over the place where this magnetism has been thrown away, then the miasma will re-enter the body and he or she will be in a worse condition than before. Part of life ether. For the life ether and genetics. The life ether is the avenue for the operation of forces which have as their primary object the perpetuation of the species in terms of humankind, the building of new racial forms. The cosmic force which works in the life ether is the third principle of deity, the creative energy of God. The lesser forces working in this ether are, briefly, the solar lunar race god Jehovah, who works with planets having moons, though his cosmic focus is the solar orb, the archangelic race spirit, the mother and father of each reincarnating ego, the part of life ether. 9. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Incarnating ego itself, nature spirits, angels and archangels, and spirits belonging to the plant life wave, including the plant group spirits. Minerals generally do not possess a life ether. Like the other ethers, the life ether has two poles, positive and negative. The positive pole predominates in the female structure, the negative pole in the male structure, the reason for this being that the female requires the extra portion of creative energy for the use of the infant body of the ego who comes to her for rebirth. The forces that work along the positive pole are those which work in the female during gestation, enabling her to do this positive, active work of bringing forth a new living form. The forces which work along the negative pole of the life ether enable.
That is our strength. Men have the physical strength advantage, women have this. And so for men that are refusing to allow women into academia, conversations, debates, or philosophical discussions, you're missing out.
Enable the male to produce semen, in which the spermatozoon containing the seed atom of the dense body of the incoming ego is deposited by the angels. The angels are the warders and keepers of the propagative seed atoms of plant, animal, and man. When working with animals, the angels are assisted by the desire body of the mother. When working with mankind, they are further assisted by the desire body of the incarnating ego itself. When the ego is ready to seek rebirth, the recording angels determine the sex of the body in which it shall function during that particular earth life, and the archetype is formed accordingly. The factor determining the sex is the law of alternation, unless this law is modified by specific circumstances established by the ego in previous earth existences. The sex is therefore determined before the etheric matrix, made of chemical and life ether, is built. The law is, when the life ether matrix of the incarnating ego is positive, it attracts negative chemical ether and physical atoms, through the agency of forces which work along the positive pole of the life ether, and the dense body will be female. When the life ether matrix is negative, it will attract positive chemical ether and physical atoms, through the agency of the forces working along the negative pole of the life ether, and the dense body will be male. This work begins in the uterus with the fertilized ovum, which is the body itself. At this stage, the incarnating ego hovers near its future mother clothed in the embryonic sheath of mind and desire body, while the matrix is placed in the womb of the mother by the angels. After the seed atom has been deposited in the body of the mother and conception takes place, the ovum being fertilized, the incoming ego remains outside for a period of from 18 to 21 days while the mother's desire body alone is working on the embryonic dense body. To the occult scientist, all elements of heredity inhere in the life ether and are manipulated by unseen intelligences, though the human being assists. The secondary sex traits are also the product of forces working through the positive and negative poles of the life ether. It is to be noted that sex traits are not confined to the primary reproductive functions of the body, but that every cell in the body shows a sex difference. For example, each cell in the female body has 23 sets or pairs of chromosomes, each pair identical twins, but in the male body each cell contains one pair that is asymmetric, that is, different. We may say that the 23rd pair of chromosomes are the sex chromosomes, which in the female body are identical, and described as the two X chromosomes, whereas the 23rd pair of chromosomes in the male body cell consists of two different chromosomes, X and Y. It is the Y chromosome that determines the maleness of the body. Until 1957 it was believed that there were 48 chromosomes, 24 pairs, in the human body cell, but in that year a new kind of microscope revealed that there were in fact only 46, 23 pairs. We repeat, what we have said here relates to every cell in the body, not to the gametes or marrying cells alone. Certain cells are set aside in the reproductive organs at the very outset of the incarnational process for the specific purpose of perpetuating the species. Although these cells divide, they do so less often than the other body cells, and are still fresh when the work of reproduction begins. Their way of dividing is also part life ether. 10. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Different from that of other cells, meiosis versus mitosis, allowing for variety in transmission of hereditary elements since these are drawn from two people instead of one alone, and many mixtures are possible. When the reserve cell splits in two it forms the gametes, which are more commonly known as ova and spermatozoa, or egg and sperm cells. The egg cells contain each one X chromosome, the sperm cells contain each one X chromosome or one Y chromosome. Also, each gamete contains only one-half the number of chromosomes of the regular cell, but when the two gametes unite the resulting cell, fertilized ovum, has once more the full number of chromosomes. The chromosomes carry minute formations called genes, which are the real agents of heredity. Since each chromosome has as many as 1,000 genes, something like 46,000 genes are available to the incarnating ego from each of its parents. Thus the genetic dye or pattern is set in the original cell, which continues to divide in the usual manner of body cells to form the new organism which is to house a human spirit. Femaleness seems to be the basic condition, the Y chromosome adds the male element. Compare Cosmoconception Diagram 13, page 364. Under the microscope the genes are seen within the cell as little crossbands on the thread like chromosomes, sometimes compared to beads. It is said that they are nature's molds, which make a certain creature conform to the pattern of his forebears. Of special interest to the occultist is the statement, gamo, that the gene is perhaps a sort of missing link between living and non-living matter, hence it is also termed the living molecule. So we can perhaps start to draw the line at this point between the common molecule which belongs to the field of the chemical ether and the living molecule which belongs to the field of the life ether asterisk. The gene is the smallest unit of living matter. Yet it also possesses characteristics of the complex molecule, like those of proteins, which are subject to all the familiar laws of chemistry. Gamo. It is estimated that the gene has about 1 million atoms. Occultists say that the genes and chromosomes are deposited by forces working in the life ether. Therefore the two lower ethers do in fact constitute a vital or life body which acts as a matrix, in terms of a network or meshwork of force, into which the atoms of the body are collected in a living pattern or organism. It is taught that the blood and ductless, endocrine, glands are in a special sense the highest product of the vital body, and among the ductless glands the pituitary body, located in the head, is in the words of modern biophysicists the most powerful sex organ in the body. Its secretions govern the fertility cycles in both men and women. It is the focus of the life spirit, macrocosmic Christ, in man, which is a fire. Occult Principles of Health and Healing p. 127. The vital body as a whole is the reflection or emanation. We might even say, condensation, of the same principle. The vital body pages 52-53. All hormones secreted and released into the bloodstream by the ductless glands are expressions of the life ether, but those like the pituitary body and gonads, which secrete sex hormones are especially so, for these are the active participants, with the genes and chromosomes, in the reproductive cycles of the individual and the race. Eventually the cosmic Christ life must of necessity supplant the Jehovistic race principle, in its entirety. The number of chromosomes in each cell differs from one species of life to another. Only the human body contains 46 chromosomes. The entire development and practically all properties of the adult organism are determined by the set of genes hidden in each chromosome in every body cell. Every animal or plant grows around its genes. This has been compared with the way a lump of inorganic matter is formed. For example, certain atomic nuclei carrying a charge of 6 positive electric units will surround themselves with atomic envelopes of 6 electrons each, which cause the atoms to tend to arrange themselves in a regular hexagonal pattern, forming part it life ether. 11. Etheric vision and what it reveals. The crystals that we call diamonds. It goes without saying that even the very simplest living organism is far more complex than the diamond, but in both cases we have the typical phenomena of macrocosmic organization being determined to the last detail by microscopic centers or organizing activity. Gamma. Asterisk. It is rightly said that the laws of heredity show a mathematical simplicity and clearness which suggest that we are dealing with one of the fundamental phenomena of life. 5. The spiral of life. It has been previously shown what physical science has to say about the life forces in the human organism. We take note again that the carbon atom is the crux of the chemical life process, in the words of the scientist, whereas the structure of the universe depends upon hydrogen, the structure of life depends upon carbon. Carbon is the essential building block upon which all living things have been constructed. Why should this be? Life requires atoms which have the ability to form themselves into exceptionally large molecules. What gives the carbon atom this special property of adhering to other atoms on so large a scale? It appears to be an ordinary atom distinguished by having 6 planetary electrons, whereas boron and nitrogen, its neighbors in the atomic table, have 5 and 7 electrons respectively, yet the carbon atom is quite unique. This is due to its peculiar structure. It is known as a quadrivalent atom because it has a power of 4 in forming combinations of atoms, in comparison with others having more or less. It is this quality that gives the carbon atom its tremendous potentiality of creating more complex structures. In fact, the number of possible compounds, based on this versatile atom, actually runs into millions. The Living Universe, Gatland, and Dempster. For centuries occult science has spoken of the diamond body of the adept, or of the adept himself as the living diamond. Here in modern biochemistry a hint of revelation shines forth, for this carbon atom, which bulks so large in the life process, is the same form which nature long ago formed diamonds in the rocky strata of the primordial earth globe. The diamond is the symbol of immortality, but it is more than a symbol. It is a promise. Behind the diamond lay the energy of sunshine, the pressure of masses of rock, and the heat of the still young earth. The same forces are present in the human organism, though in another form, and shadow forth the ultimate destiny of the human being. In popular thought fire and water are taken as opposites, but in occult chemistry they are in fact complementaries. And so it is not surprising. Intimately connected with the life ether is the colorless solar ether or solar fluid, which pours in through the spleen center of the etheric body, for the life ether is the particular avenue for the specialization of this solar fluid, Max Heindel states. Now just as there is a universal or macrocosmic life fire, called the life spirit, which is the Christ principle, so also there is a macrocosmic magnetism visible to etheric sight as a kind of rain which seems to fall in slanting lines toward the earth. Many people have seen this fall of cosmic force without knowing what they saw. It is not the same as the cosmic rays of modern science, although, since the sun is a star and the stars are all suns, there is no reason to suppose that this solar ether would not include forces emanating from distant stars and nebulae, as well as from our Sunday matter and light involve electromagnetic phenomena, so too does life, as biologists are now discovering. The sex force so-called, is generated in the life ether, as the solar or cosmic force rushes in through the spleen. 5. The spiral of life. 12. Etheric vision and what it reveals. The cosmic magnetic rain is colorless, like water, and as rain consists of separate droplets of water, so too this magnetic rain consists of separate units of force. Moreover, it has an affinity for water, and Mesmer discovered that the oceans are
the sun's travel path and the other luminaries, with the North Pole at the center, directly above the North Pole, where there's like we have like the strongest like magnetic force is why compasses are like effective, pointing towards the north. But the sun travels from left to right. It travels in a rightward direction, and so I think there's parallels to this as well. I don't think this has anything to do with like being left-handed, being like the devil or anything like that. I'm exaggerating on that, but when they're speaking about being on the right-hand side of God or Creator, I think possibly it has to do with the fact that the Earth is stationary. It's projected on a flat plane of inertia where we're experiencing it, but it's the luminaries that travel and create these centripetal and centrifugal forces, and then impact the ether.
charged with what he termed solar magnetism, and so are lakes, rivers, and streams. And of course the highly magnetic human body reveals its origin in primordial seas in the fact that it is more than 80% water. Mesmer also said that the sun was a great magnet, which modern astronomy now verifies. Frontiers of Astronomy, Hoyle. Plants are rich in the life ether, and so are certain animal products such as fresh cow's milk, still warm from the milking. Most of the human needs are met through the ingestion of plant foods, to which is added the magnetism pouring in through the spleen. Someday man will not need to sustain himself on plant food, but will draw his sustenance directly from the cosmic energy field itself. The universal magnetism rushes through the spleen to the seed atom of the vital body located in the solar plexus, thence it fans out through the body, radiating through the nerves. Without these magnetic currents the body could not function, but would be inert and motionless, like an electric machine with the current turned off. The activity of the vital as it separates the solar fluid is audible to etheric hearing as a steady drone, or hum, and the vortices of force are clearly felt. The keynote of this activity is set by the sounding flame which burns in the medulla oblongata, which in turn sounds the keynote of the archetype. When the ego wills action, it causes the brain to specialize great quantities of this energy, which pours out to the muscles and compels action. It is the same force which the ego used earlier when building the body in the maternal womb *. Max Heindel describes the million mouths which in the positive, female, vital body suck in the solar energy in far greater measure than the negative, male, vital body is able to do, and this, he says, accounts for the great recuperative capacity of girls and women. The excess force is supplied to the female vital body for the needs of motherhood, but it is there for use in everyday life as well. Students sometimes see these mouths as circles, and it would seem that these circles are the basic unit of the positive pole of the life ether, which determines the shape of the overall magnetic matrix, which is a network, or meshwork, of force. Within the magnetic meshwork are innumerable whirlpools. Most physicists agree that an electric charge in motion generates a magnetic field, but a few are researching the possibility that magnetism and electricity are not in fact the same thing, and they postulate the existence of monopolies, which are to magnetism what the electron is to electricity. According to this theory, there are both positive and negative monopoles, just as there are positive and negative electrons. The occult student speaks from the standpoint of etheric experience, and therefore speaks of both electricity and magnetism of the body in connection with the two lower ethers, but it is to be observed that the electrical forces are most often referred to in connection with the chemical ether and the magnetic forces with the life ether. Or spirals of force, large and small, some turning left-handed and some right-handed. This reminds us of the saying that light is energy running in circles, running freely, whereas matter is bottled up energy. The chemical ether is the bottle for non-living matter, the life and chemical ether together are the bottle for living matter. The etheric atom and the physical atom are as a rule tightly intertwined, but occult students, and some others, often feel a sensation as of the etheric atom unscrewing from the physical atom. Only recently has physical science come to realize that it does make a difference in nature whether a force runs right-handed or left-handed. Formerly the law of parity expressed the common belief that it made no difference in nature which way the forces run. A whole new branch of science has developed out of the discovery that it does. 5. The spiral of life. 13. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Definitely make a difference, both to structure of matter and the development of life. Everywhere in nature one finds the law of the spiral, from nebulae and galaxies in the heavens to the spiraling growth of leaf and bud in plants, right down into the helix of chromosomes on which the genes are strung like beads, and down still farther to ions and to the atomic bases of substances which live or once had life. There we discover again that the carbon atom seems to be a special agent of the spiraling habit. For although there are some non-living molecules and ions which also show the spiraling habit, this characteristic is frequently the sign of the life forces. We quote, "What started the right-handedness and left-handedness now so vital to living things? If some life process must accompany the separation of right-handed from left-handed materials, how could life begin in the first place? If everything now right-handed were suddenly made left-handed, would life proceed without interruption and without change? These are deeply studied problems. Some good guesses have been made, but they have not produced the full answer. The guesses have come and perhaps the full answer will come from examining the symmetries of the forces acting on matter, along with the symmetries of the matter on which they act. Crystals furnish one of the most beautiful examples of order and symmetry. Thinking further, you will find that order and symmetry have very far-reaching application in all the natural sciences. Today physicists think of the symmetries of the fundamental particles of which the universe is made, of the fields of force in which those particles find themselves, and of the mathematical equations which describe the resulting behavior of the world. Chemists think of the symmetries of the molecules, simple and complicated, made of those particles. And biologists think of those symmetries, that orderliness, in their effort to understand the origin and behavior of life itself. Crystals and Crystal Growing, Holden and Singer, pages 274-275. 6. Organic vs. Inorganic magnetism. Although we may speak of the magnetic rain as solar ether, it is not a property of sunlight. It is seen falling through space in dense darkness as well as in the light. This is why occult science classifies it with the light ether is the particular avenue for its specialization. Its fluidic magnetism is the source of what is commonly known as sex attraction, which occult science views as an activity of the positive and negative poles of the light ether. Polarity, as such, however, is not limited to the light ether or to the sexuality of organically propagating creatures. It is found on higher spiritual planes as well, where it manifests in a different way. As evolution advances, the incarnating entity, ego, is able to specialize more and more of this cosmic magnetic fluid, and therefore the human being specializes this energy in far greater quantities than do plants and animals. Moreover, Max Heindel's investigation suggested that the forces entering through the spleen show different colors according to the various uses made of it by the different light waves. Teachings of an Initiate, p. 172. This colorless ether is in fact the original form of the animal magnetism or organic magnetism traditionally assigned to all living creatures, but not to the mineral kingdom. Sex and heredity are part of the function, but not the whole function, which is, in general, the promotion of life in the entire organism. Note that there is a mineral as well as an animal magnetism. We may liken the difference between these two kinds of magnetism to that between inorganic and organic iron. The plant takes the mineral element iron and transmutes it into organic iron, which is abundant, for example, in the green leaves of the plant, yet this organic iron is outwardly not in the least like a lump of iron, or iron ore, from which it is originally derived. The magnetic field of the light ether, as we have seen, builds the embryo in the womb beginning with the fertilized ovum, and because the child body requires large quantities of this ether, the child's etheric aura is larger in proportion to its body than is the adult's. This reserve supply of ether in the child's aura consists of 6. Organic vs inorganic magnetism. 14. Etheric vision and chemical ether atoms as well as a reserve supply of the cosmic life force. The prismatic ether atom actually consists of both life and chemical ether. Physical science has as yet discovered neither the colorless solar fluid nor the fact that it is subject to the human will. Yet, if it were not subject to the human will, it could not be true that the higher life forms specialize larger and larger quantities of it. The cosmic magnetic rain does indeed respond to the human will, which is focused in the frontal sinus as we know. A sense of heat often accompanies the downpouring of the cosmic rain. Max Heindel points out that in early epochs of our cosmic force did enter the vital body at the will of the human being, and in a different way from that by which it enters at present, through the spleen. We can now begin to recover the conscious use of the cosmic life forces. Drawing the inorganic force through the human magnetic aura converts it to organic magnetism, which the human body needs for growth. Hence the ancient practice of laying on of hands. The magnetic healer builds, in effect, an artificial womb of force in which the body of his patient is able to reconstruct itself. A case is reported of a child born with buds in the place of fingers on one hand, and under months of work by a group of dedicated church healers, members of an Orthodox communion, these buds, which are found in the embryo, unfolded and grew into normal fingers, just as if the child had been placed back in the mother's womb and growth taken up where it left off. Again, Max Heindel has commented that when it, solar fluid, is sent out by the brain in particularly large quantities, it moves the muscles to which the nerves lead. But for the work of bodybuilding, which is what healing really is, still greater quantities of the solar fluid are required, and unless these are called down from space by way of the frontal sinus, human will, and thence directed by the brain, such miracles as we have mentioned cannot be performed, and oftentimes more than one healer must work on the case. The group of healers mentioned above knew nothing of the modus operandi of the cosmic forces, but nevertheless successfully invoked them through prayer to a divinity whom they pictured as in heaven. It is noteworthy that most of the healers were women with their positive vital bodies. The science called mesmerism involves the use of these cosmic forces, but mesmerism is not the same as modern hypnotism, which depends upon suggestion. Suggestion could not have made the embryonic buds unfold into fingers for the child. Neither could suggestion delay corruption of a piece of meat, or a vegetable, as the application of live magnetism has been reported to have done. We have said that magnetic force is nearly always allied with some form of moisture, like the sap of the tree in plants and the blood of animals and humans, or other fluids. Trees cut down for Christmas trees bleed their sap away, and as this bleeding goes on, the tree's vital magnetism rushes out, a veritable hemorrhage of force, soon after cutting, then more slowly until the tree is dead and its needles brown. It is painful to any sensitive person to sit in the room with a tree so palpably bleeding to death, and most occult students prefer a living tree, or at least a tree culled by the Forestry Service to make room for a healthier growth on mountain slopes, or an artificial tree, of which there are many beautiful specimens. The solar force flowing in through the spleen is a cosmic force, but still inorganic from the human point of view, which by the alchemy of the incarnating spirit becomes an organic force of life magnetism. Iron is important to the creation of human magnetism, and there are 4 atoms of iron in every normal hemoglobin cell, and the presence of iron in the planet is undoubtedly concerned in the planetary magnetism. But there are also great magnetic fields in interstellar spaced matrices of future worlds. We have been speaking of life forces, but occult science also speaks of death forces, and as the life force is associated with the sun, so the death forces are associated with the moon. Max Heindel speaks of the death-dealing moon forces and also the crystallizing moon forces. The life process is a balance between 6. Organic vs inorganic magnetism. 15. Etheric vision and what it reveals. The upbuilding solar forces and the down-tearing lunar forces. In some ancient schools of occult science, these currents are known as upward-flowing and downward-flowing breaths. The growth cycles of the vital body are set in septenary periods derived from the crystallizing lunar forces. 7 years is the span of maturation of the etheric sheath, the vital body being born from its sheath at the age of 7, then the several ethers maturing further, separately, in 7-year cycles, the life ether at 14 with the desire body, the light ether at 21 with the mind, the reflecting ether at 28 with the mind's full maturation. Max Heindel also mentions an ancient tradition of moon beings whose lifespan from infancy to old age is but 7 years. Such cases are known to medical science. We have spoken heretofore of etheric sight and etheric hearing. We must also take note of an etheric sense of touch. The life ether is sensed, for example, as a kind of heavy magnetic fluid. One may call it syrupy, if it is understood that we mean by this that its magnetism gives it this consistency. When the invisible helper dips his hands into the etheric body of the patient and then withdraws them, the vital body of the patient seems to cling to his hands. Ordinarily, of course, the patient does not feel his own magnetism, but the helper's magnetic aura in this instance is exerting an outside attraction. This is the cement of assimilation about which Max Heindel speaks, the vital body, p. 71. Note that the cement of assimilation belonging to the life ether is found below the molecular threshold of the body, whereas the cement of the chemical ether is definitely molecular, as shown in the fact that the lines of force of the vital body carry off these molecules, which many seers have described. We have said that the molecule is the smallest portion of a substance which can still be called matter. When we break down the molecule we have entered into the world of atoms, and when we break down the atoms we enter the world of subatomic forces. And here on the borderline of matter we enter the states known to occult science as the life ether asterisk. The invisible helper works directly within and upon the molecular structure of the body in the chemical ether, though he can materialize a hand physical enough to perform massage, make chiropractic adjustments, or even perform surgery. Biochemists naturally assume that all of the electromagnetic phenomena of the body derive from the body's chemistry. The occultist claims that the vital body has an independent existence, that it exists prior to the body and is its continuing matrix. No doubt biochemists will one day take their instruments and test a dead body and, of course, find no electromagnetic field. This, they will declare, proves that it emanates from the body, which being dead, has no field. But if the occultist is right, the biochemist will. Asterisk all reactions, including those of living matter, are linked to the nucleus. 1964-1965. Discover his electric field if he evolves sensitive instruments capable of exploring the space a few feet above the corpse, for there he will find that for a few days after death, a magnetic field does exist, floating above the corpse. And even later, if he knew where to look, and where to transport his instruments, and how to place them, he might discover a human-shaped magnetic field which corresponded to the dead body but separated from it in space as well as in time. But if the theory of a floating magnetic field seems strange, we may recall that astronomers now postulate that magnetic fields exist in interstellar space which if they do nothing else speed the cosmic rays on their way through the universe. 6. Organic vs. Inorganic magnetism. 16. Etheric vision and what it reveals. 7. The life ether and cosmic fire. Mention has been made several times of the life fire which burns in the life ether. It is not merely a physical heat, but a fire which denotes the presence of a living spirit. In the so-called lost sayings of Jesus discovered in Egypt in 1904, and again in 1945, the statement occurs, wherever there are two, they are not without God, and wherever there is one I say I am with him. Raise the stone and there thou shalt find me, cleave the rock and there I am. There is still in use in certain churches an Easter ceremonial in which part of the ritual consists of striking a spark from a rock, and lighting the Easter candles from the flame built from the spark, suggesting that the cosmic fire, life spirit, is meant in these verses. Yet the universal fire is cold while it sleeps in the rock and in cosmic space, it is still cold in the plant kingdom, although to the etheric side it has the appearance of a delicate flame, not a flame which burns and leaps, but a steady glow of the pink-orange which characterizes the life ether in the plant kingdom. In animals and men it takes on a deeper rosy or red hue, for just as the radiation of energy and atomic particles are not visible to the human eye, although they exist, so the heat of cold-blooded animals or of plants is not detectable to human senses in the common range. Apropos of which we quote Dr. Donald H. Andrews of Johns Hopkins University, who said in a speech, "If you turn out the lights and stand in the dark, you do not appear to be glowing. Yet if you stand in front of an infrared television camera in complete darkness, the television screen will show you as a glowing form, beaming with light which radiates out from you as a result of the vibrations of your atoms." This is an established physical fact. It is now some 10 years since a professor attached to Chicago University, Dr. Bernard Streller, and another attached to the National Laboratory at Oak Ridge, Dr. William Arnold, discovered that green plants give off a faint red light, much as fireflies do, and then produced in the laboratory is...
So like even with the green light being incredibly important, I still have this board. I've explained this multiple times before, but just how the chakras, the days of the week, the colors, the zodiacal signs, the elements, etc. They're correlated in various different ways. You've got green on the for the visible light spectrum, where we have there's 7 colors essentially that's broken down in here, and you have green in the middle, right? And so at the lower level you have red, and then it's orange, yellow, green, then blue, indigo, and violet at the top, right? And then we also see this in the infrareds and the violets regarding the non-visible light spectrum as well. There's a gradient or a range, whatever you want to call it, and we even as humans. So that's also why I believe that we're existing within this flat plane of inertia at the center, within the center of these of this contained environment that's being projected via hyperboloids and toroidal fields, utilizing electricity and magnetism, and light being again like what is the essence of these energies or forces, based on different temperatures, pressures, and densities. But anyways, we also see more shades of green than any other color, and that's also very interesting to me. And green is correlated with Venus, the element copper, Friday for the day of the week, the heart chakra, which is the 4th chakra, and then for the zodiacal signs, it's Libra and Taurus. Libra being the positive, and then Taurus being the negative forces or energies that are encompassed within that. And so Venus rules over Libra and Taurus, also out of the astrological signs. And then there's discussion about like 12 in here as well, like, and I think that's symbolic of the luminaries. Then talking about this 13th, whatever you want to call it, entity or deity, whatever he wants to call it. I believe that is the sun. And so again, just like Mithras, Dionysus, Horus, Krishna, Jesus, etc., Apollo, Horus, I can go on. Like these are all representations of the sun, the actual sun in the sky that is not 93 million miles away,
substance which seems to be
or
the
light
same
years
as
away,
that which
whatever
in the
they're
plant
claiming.
emits
It's
the red glow.
93 million miles.
The red light cannot be seen with the naked eye, they pointed out, but something producing it must be there. They added, these findings were made possible by the study of fireflies and luminous bacteria. It is now thought that there is a close relationship between light emission, which releases energy, and photosynthesis, which stores energy. Even more surprising is the fact that the same chemical compounds which are responsible for light emission in fireflies and the luminous bacteria often causing lighted fish at night, are involved in photosynthesis. Only in warm-blooded animals and in humankind does the cold fire of space tail on heat, which is felt as such to human sensory equipment. The heat aspect of the life ether in the human body is really a property conferred by the activity of forces operating in the positive pole of the light ether, with which we are concerned in our next set of lessons. For just as we have not been able wholly to separate the chemical ether from the life ether, so we cannot wholly separate the life ether from the light ether. All of the ethers react and interact one with the other. As color is associated with sunlight in the common range of vision, so color is associated with the body magnetism to the etheric vision.
Exactly.
The 5 colors specialized by the ethers, which stand between violet and red in a color circle, are not found in the solar spectrum as known to ordinary vision. They do not occur in the rainbow, which is refracted sunlight. These are the colors running from beyond violet, through
Refracted
mid-purple,
sunlight.
magenta or peach blossom color, to below red. But though these colors are not found in the solar spectrum, they are true primary colors in the desire world, and the peach blossom color is the color of the life force as seen in the life ether in the human body. Max Heindel says that this color is not always described in identical terms by those who see it. He himself calls it pink blue or pinkish purple. It is the expression of the universal life spirit, as noted before, and since it is life ether it appears only in plants, animals, and man, not in the mineral kingdom. Ordinarily the color of the vital body is called a rosy hue. The chemical ether is characterized by blue or indigo, deepening to mid-purple or near black. 7. The life ether and cosmic fire. 17. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Other colors may also appear in these 2 lower ethers, but those mentioned are basic. When the solar ether pours through the spleen and is refracted in the seed atom of the vital body in the solar plexus, it pours through the body so that every atom of the body, both physical and etheric, receives its stimulation. The excess force then radiates outward in rose-colored lines. Mr. Heindel's first thought when studying the ethers was that this force took on its rosy hue by refraction through each prismatic ether atom. Later he decided the change occurred in the solar plexus seed atom, and a cluster of atoms around it. Cosmoconception, P10. He had not completed his researches at the time of his sudden death in January, 1919. Summary. Now let us turn once more to the view of the vital body available to the etheric side of the occult scientist. Necessarily the vital body atom is seen in conjunction with the physical atom, with which the etheric atom is tightly entwined. To picture the physical and etheric atom of the body, imagine a pear-shaped wire basket having walls of spirally curved wire running obliquely from pole to pole. This is the physical part of the atom. It is shaped nearly like our Earth, and the prismatic vital body atom is inserted at the top, which is widest, and corresponds to the positive pole of the Earth. Since the vital prism is inserted at the top, the point of the prism extends toward the bottom of the basket, which is termed the negative pole. The whole atom, thus interpenetrated, resembles a top swinging, swaying, and vibrating, in a note which is set by the archetype and the sounding flame in the medulla oblongata. This suggests that the prism is part of the atomic nucleus, of which little was known during Max Heindel's lifetime, while the wire basket would be, perhaps, the spiraling paths of electrons traveling in the magnetic vortices determined by the life ether. Note that this atom is not disc-shaped but pear-shaped, as it is now thought the Earth globe may really be, with the white part at the south pole asterisk. The etheric prisms expand when life force is rushing through them. They contract, shrivel up, in fatigue, and the lines of force are crumpled and bent, forcing the ego to withdraw in sleep. On page 138 of Rosicrucian Mysteries, Max Heindel comments that when the vital body collapses, as it were, the little streams of force which permeate each atom seem to shrivel up, and the ego is forced to abandon its body to the restorative powers of sleep. He also mentions certain forces which circle the atom and the Earth from pole to equator. The vital body P42. To the etheric vision, points of the etheric prisms are seen sticking out in every direction. But just as physical vision varies, so also etheric vision varies from person to person, and although all see much the same thing, it is seen in varying degrees of sharpness and clarity. Students should therefore Max Heindel specifically designates this as the common physical atom, but modern occult writers point out that it is perhaps not the hydrogen atom, but an etheric atom which is really subatomic. Of the so-called ultimate physical atom, Max Heindel says, if we are so far developed that we are able to leave our dense physical body and take soul flight into interplanetary space, we shall find that the ultimate physical atom is spherical in shape like our Earth. It is a ball.
No, it's not.
Rosicrucian Mysteries p89.
Not a ball.
19th century physics once held that atoms were of various shapes, hence this comment that the true atom is round. Modern physicists say that the atoms of matter are energy running in circles. Summary. 18. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Avoid arbitrary statements until they are quite sure that their etheric side is reasonably well developed. To one, the vital body may appear to be no more than a vaguely colored mist extending about 1.5 inches from the body. To another, this mist resolves itself into a multitude of rose-colored lines of force. The chemical ether may be seen lying close to the body, and to some its dark blue color may seem to be an empty space like the core of a gas flame. Many have seen crystals, molecules, and particles streaming from the surface of the body. Sparks of vital energy which shoot from head, face, and hands are seen now and again by almost everyone. They are also seen around plants, and a blue spark which flies from a seed sometimes signals the presence of a nature spirit which dwells in the seed. We usually discover that when Max Heindel says vital body, he means specifically the life ether, rather more than the chemical ether, for of course, vital means pertaining to life, but it is the chemical ether which forms the actual etheric double of every single molecule in the human body. However, each atom is also penetrated and surrounded by a slight aura of the light and reflecting ethers. The vital body p43. Death of the body occurs when the archetype collapses, which is followed by the rupture of the seed atom in the heart and the collapse of the vital body, as before sleep, forcing the ego to withdraw from its vehicles. The vital body is then seen to rise like a twisting column of smoke, which reforms itself into the individual's likeness above the body, to which it is still attached by the lower part of the silver cord, and with which it decays synchronously. Folklore describes this phenomenon as the corpse candle, and although it is usually seen as a more or less luminous blue-gray mist, it has been seen on occasion as green or blue-green in color, changing color in the process of decomposition. Death is often accompanied by the sensation of a spiraling motion in the atoms of the body, but this sensation is not necessarily an indication of death, and the student need feel no alarm if it occurs. The pre-initiatory work unscrews the ether atoms in a safe way, enabling the initiate to rise out of the body, leaving the two lower ethers with the physical body. Only a certain exercise given by true occult teachers enables the individual to make the right cleavage in the ethers, between the two lower and the two higher. Wrong exercises, especially such as taught in mediumship class sesame, cause a cleavage between the chemical and life ethers, or between the chemical ether atoms and the physical atoms, and when this happens, various diseases, such as tuberculosis, may result. The vital body, p71, but in any case, the spiraling of the atoms is a characteristic sensation. It should also be observed here that when the chemical and life ethers are driven out of the dense body, deep unconsciousness occurs, which is not sleep, and when consciousness returns upon the vital atoms re-entering their physical counterparts, a tingling sensation is felt. Physiologists say this is due to the circulation of the blood being restored, for the same sensation occurs when the circulation is cut off from a part of the body, as when a hand goes to sleep. When this happens, the occultist sees the etheric hand hanging below the physical. Similarly, in hypnosis, the etheric head is pushed down around the shoulders of the subject, dividing from above. The circulation of the blood slows down, too, under such conditions. The atoms of the physical body have a very slow vibration. The ether atom prods every physical atom into action and vibration, including the atoms of the blood. In the human body, the rate of vibration of the physical atom is normally an octave below the vibration of the ether atom which ensouls it. The vital body p.191, the PRIC cling sensation which results from the ether atom is re-entering the physical atom from which it has been driven out, does not cease until the normal vibration of the body atom, 1 octave below the etheric, has been reached. Then the discomfort stops, for normal activity is once more established. Summary. 19. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Occult science has not yet clarified the relationship between the planetary, solar, and ether magnetism of living things on Earth. Horoscopes for persons born in the southern hemisphere are traditionally reversed, so that where a northern chart shows Aries rising, for example, the southern chart would show Libra. Is this, perhaps, an effect of planetary polarity? This is one of the many mysteries still to be solved by the occult science of the future. 8-star and spiral. We have seen in an earlier chapter what modern science has to say about the spiral. It is a curious fact that the 5-pointed star, always of great importance to esotericism, is also recognized as a special feature of life on this planet, as we learn in the new biology. Let us explore a little further into the part which this symbol plays in the world about us. On a certain tarot card, designed by A.E. Waite, is found this interesting design, a little flower growing which is shaped like a true star with 5 points. There really is such a flower, shaped like a 5-pointed star, with the same star form repeated several times, at the heart of the blossom and at its base. The star itself is a delicate mauve color, not dissimilar to the pinkish blue of the vital body as Max Heindel describes it, and its petals are like soft velvet to the touch. It grows principally in Australia, but also occurs in parts of the Near East and Asia, and it has been discovered recently by California gardeners, for it grows well in Southern California. It is called the Hoya flower. Now, among the 6 crystal systems known to science, there is no permissible form with an axis of 5-fold symmetry, and therefore no crystal can have such an axis. Crystals and Crystal Growing, Holden and Singer, p. 163. It is interesting to reflect upon the difference between crystals and living organisms in this respect. Starfish and buttercups, for example, have axes of 5-fold symmetry, but crystals cannot. Therefore there is no star, no pentangle in the crystal domain, which includes the largest part of our solid earth crust, but only in the kingdom of life. The 5-petaled wild rose, ancestor of all modern roses, may also be mentioned with starfish and buttercups. It can scarcely be doubted that ancient scientists had observed this simple fact of nature, for everywhere the 5-pointed star is the symbol of the human being, as in Christianity it is the symbol of the Christ child and points to the birth of the Christ in every man. Intimately associated with the esotericism of the 5-pointed star is the life spiral observed throughout the universe. In occult symbolism it is seen as the serpents entwining the staff of Mercury, the caduceus, and as such it is the representative of the ascent of the threefold spinal spirit fire, discussed in Freemasonry and Catholicism, an ancient and modern initiation by Max Heindel. Esotericists will understand at a glance the supreme importance of this combination of symbols, the star and the spiral, both intimately concerned in the most complicated life processes. In Masonic symbolism, in the rites and mysteries of the Rose Cross and Holy Grail, the spiral is viewed in the stairway once found in Solomon's Temple. Historians and archaeologists have not been in complete accord as to the kind of building Solomon's Temple really was, some likening it to the temples of ancient Ur in Chaldea, Abraham's birthplace, where the temple of the moon god crowned the uppermost of 3 great stages of mountain-like masonry. Others have likened it to the ziggurats of Babylon, 7-staged pyramids with a small domed cella, or sanctuary, on the top story in which the god was said to appear to the priestess, or priest. We may look upon this upper room of the Babylonian temple as the place of the oracle, where the will of heaven was made known. 8-star and spiral. 20. Etheric vision and what it reveals. There were 2 ziggurats, or stepped pyramids, within the walls of the Greater Babylon, the Temple of Bel within the central area, and the Temple of Nebo, or Mercury, farther east in the suburb of Borsippa, the 2 connected by a sacred way, or walled street. The Tower of Mercury at Borsippa was the more ancient and the more sacred, and one may well believe that from its summit the priest astronomers watched for the tiny star near the sun which was the planet Mercury. The stepped pyramids of Chaldea and Babylonia necessarily had stairways and inclines leading from one stage to another, until the top story was reached. Doubtless they also had secret, interior spiraling stairways, as shortcuts to the summit, known only to the priests and their initiates, as the Great Pyramids of Giza in Egypt would suggest. However, archaeologists have never discovered any such interior passageway in the Babylonian pyramids and towers. Assyria and Persia shared the Chaldean civilization, and also had towers which were at the same time observatories and temples. They also housed great libraries. More clearly, perhaps, than anywhere else, China shows the true nature of the pyramids and towers built in ancient times, as for example the famous Altar of Heaven at Peking, with its 3 marble terraces and 9 concentric circles, its stairways at the 4 cardinal points, and the numerous pagodas, some with as many as 13 stories, each with its encircling roof, and containing nothing but a spiraling staircase leading to the summit, obviously designed for astronomical observatories, as well as for worship of heaven in a nation where for 1,000 years before Christ the official religion was a purely astronomical one. In recent times archaeologists have discovered in the ruins at Qumran, the Essene headquarters on the Dead Sea, traces of a tower, and in it the suggestion of an upright central pillar around which a stairway once wound. Was this merely a storehouse, a watchtower, or an observatory? Perhaps all these, and more. It is notable that Mercury, and Mercury's day of the week, were important to the Essenes. It is said that Wednesday was their Sabbath. Turning now to Christian Europe, we find that in some accounts the legendary Temple of the Grail also had its high tower, within which was the spiral stairway leading to the top level where the Grail Chapel was found and the Grail mysteries celebrated. What was shown in these mysteries at the top of the tower? Obviously the dome of heaven revolving around the dragon-guarded pole star, and just before the dawn at certain times of the year, the planet Mercury, sparkling like a diamond not far from the rising sun. For this is precisely what the earliest legends say, that the mystery of the Grail is revealed in the stars of heaven, especially the zodiac and its decans. Other accounts say that the temple craftsmen pictured the heavens within the overarching dome, with stars and planets moving in their courses. Similarly, in the Temple of Healing at Mount Ecclesia, the domed ceiling suggests the vault of heaven, around which the 12 constellations of the zodiac are ranged, with Leo, the lion of the mysteries, over the altar, and Aquarius, the son of man, whosoever wills may come, over the door of entry. In an era when illiteracy was common, it is easy to see how the neophyte would be taught to visualize the winding stair, and as his physical body relaxed into the clear sleep which is not trance as commonly defined, the wakeful mind would climb the spiral staircase to the place of mystery at its summit, turning always toward the right hand, and the neophyte awoke on the inner planes within the sanctuary of the temple of initiation, or at its threshold, or in the anterooms, according to his merit. For on the inner planes, space is no consideration. The stepping off at the top of the spiral staircase takes the neophyte at once, without intermediate traveling, to his destination. Today the philosophy of science recognizes this condition in what is termed the collapse of space and its correlative, the collapse of time. It is as if all space intervening between one point and another vanishes, and the step over from here to there is instantaneous. 8-star and spiral. 21. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Sometimes meditation affords a hint of this, for as the mind becomes spiritually lucid, the neophyte sees into a crystal space, perhaps viewing some distant spot on Earth's surface. He has not left the body, he has not gone anywhere, yet he senses the reality of the distant place, and is sometimes seen, or even tangibly felt, or his mental voice audibly heard by persons living there. He feels that he might put out a hand and touch objects in that far-off place, for he is there and here at the same moment. This collapse of space accounts for many strange dreams in which events and places seem to melt into one another without rhyme or reason. It also explains why one and the same mystery temple has been discovered in many different places, in the dense dark forest, on mountain summit, in swamps and marshes, in palaces and courts, in the seeker's own house. When the neophyte does experience a sense as of movement in inner space, it means that his attention is tracing out the intervening distance, and in a manner of speaking, building a thought trail or bridge over which he seems to travel. This is, however, unnecessary. The travel can be immediate, and with no sense of transition. Thus to the student in the mystery school, the star, and the spiral, in addition to their outer, exoteric scientific significance, reveal something different and unique, the spiral ascent of the mind in the tower of consciousness, and at its summit the bright and blazing star which is the invisible helper himself, shining for the world. With the dawn, the helper returns to his body, and as he hovers over it, feeling the magnetic pull of the vital body drawing him down into the fleshly sheath, he is aware of the rotating of many wheels of force in his aura, and while these wheels rotate, he settles gently, with no shock or discomfort, into the dense physical instrument which lies upon the bed. He there awakens, to take up anew the cross of the body in the world of time and space. Part 3 Light Ether. 9. The Light Ether and the Sun. In our chapter on the life ether we learned something about what Max Heindel designated the colorless solar ether and solar fluid, and we noted that this solar fluid was visible to etheric sight under several varying states or conditions. As a kind of rain of cosmic force it rushes in through the etheric spleen, and turns a rose color in the solar plexus. We noted further that this solar fluid was magnetic, and was felt as such by the etheric senses, and that although it is called a solar ether it is studied in connection with the life ether rather than with the light ether, because the life ether is the particular avenue through which it is specialized. As magnetism it belongs to the dark spectrum which exists below and above the normal range of light visible to the human eye. In cold-blooded creatures and in the plant kingdom, the solar ether seems colorless and cold as viewed by the etheric senses. We can draw a parallel with this condition if we take in our hands an ordinary iron magnet. This magnet will have a north and a south pole, or positive and negative, and will pick up iron filings, yet ordinarily we can neither see light nor feel any sort of sensation emanating from the magnet. The iron is cold and dark, despite its magnetic field which is so easily demonstrated. Only when the light ether is acting in conjunction with the life ether do we have the appearance of biological magnetism and the life fire of warm-blooded creatures. The colors associated with the activities of the life ether, we observed, were those from ultraviolet to infrared, and other rays not yet familiar to the lay public.
If people are interested, iron is correlated with the third chakra, which is the solar plexus region. Which in a lot of different cultures is a very significant energy system. It's correlated with the day of the week, Tuesday, or Matzi, which is why it's also correlated with the luminary Mars. Mars rules over Scorpio and Aries, Scorpio being the negative energy, Aries being the positive. And I think I already said that it's correlated with the color yellow. But anyway, it's just very interesting.
Public perception of these forces and colors, however, is something else again. Part 3 Light Ether. 22. Etheric vision and what it reveals. When the occult student begins his study of the light ether, he enters into the range of light, heat, and color of the normal senses, because the so-called 5 senses are the gift of forces working through the negative pole of this ether. We may say further, however, that the light ether is the stronghold of the brain-mind, because it is the seat of all sensory perception, both within, below, and above the normal range of the sense organs. Extrasensory perception belongs to this ether in its higher reaches where it impinges upon and interacts with the reflecting ether. The forces working along the negative pole of the light ether are the ones that vitalize, and in the beginning create, the sense organs, especially the eye, giving them the power to respond to and recognize differences in rates of vibration, and to classify these vibrations according to the effects they produce in ego awareness. The nervous system is its special field of activity. We know, of course, that the nerves are in reality part of the sensory mechanism of the brain, which is made of the same gray matter as the nerves, and the new biology knows that electrical impulses travel through brain and nerves. Vibrations ranging from 16 to 32,000 per second the ego recognizes as sound. These are vibrations in the air, but there is a super sound, supersonic vibration, which is also audible to etheric senses. Another range of vibrations the ego recognizes as feelings, heat and cold, soft and hard, etc., another as seeing, another as smelling, another as tasting, and so on. All of which are simply varying rates of vibration recognized by the ego, the speed of which produces the different sensations as allocated to the five senses or kinds of receptors. There are also organs of internal reception, receptors which report to the ego such things as weight, the weight sense, heat, the heat sense, balance or equilibrium, the balance sense, the relationship of parts of the body to each other, the proprioceptor sense, essentially a muscle sense, while a nearness sense, such as blind people develop, gives the sensation of something near which cannot be seen or felt, an object which is being approached, or an invisible presence at which point the nearness sense tapes off into the extrasensory range of perception. All of these sensory perceptions are properties of the negative pole of the light ether as known to occult science. It is of special interest to the esotericist to note that the heat sense has finally been located by modern science in a special set of nerves centered in the spinal cord itself, which send out long filaments, nerves, to patches of skin, chiefly around the middle of the body. Buttocks and back are most sensitive to temperature. Reader's Digest, September, 1963, Mysteries of Our Sixth Senses. The heat control center of the body has been generally assigned to the brain area of the cerebellum or to the medulla oblongata, where occultists say that the flame of light burns. It is this negative pole of the light ether which acts with the life ether in the production of living creatures with a full range of sensory perception, or physical and etheric consciousness. The thalamus, a tiny organ in about the center of the head, and in front of the pineal gland, is thought to be the original or primitive brain, in which the primordial instincts reside, while the great mass of the brain is the seat of sensory consciousness or awareness. The pituitary body is lower down and farther forward than the thalamus. Perhaps these are the seats of the subconscious and conscious minds, as defined by modern analytical psychology. The so-called subconscious mind of modern psychology actually includes what the occult scientists term the superconscious mind, and the forces operative in the reflecting ether. Why is the range of the light ether defined in terms of the solar spectrum? Because all human senses have evolved in a system dominated by our sun, the majority of whose rays are in this particular range, from infrared to ultraviolet. Science had nothing to tell the occultists, until quite recently, about the activities of the negative and positive poles of the light ether. What the occultists saw with extended vision could not be explained in terms of academic physics. The situation has changed. A correlation is now possible, and also an part thrift light ether. 23. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Explanation, for which Planck's quantum theory is responsible. According to this theory, the basic unit of radiation is the quantum packet of energy, called a photon, which is created continuously in free space by the collisions of positrons and electrons, and are also released from the interior of atoms when electronic changes occur. No law has yet been discovered to show just how or when these sparks of energy are created or liable to be created. There is an uncertainty principle in physics. Radiation is composed of individual units, known as quanta. When there are enough of them, these quanta arrange themselves in wave patterns. Each pattern possesses a wavelength. Hoyle, thus light is both particles, in the sense of quanta, or energy packets, and waves. Both are visible as such to the etheric side. We will understand this better if we think of a few drops of water, which do not form a wave, but when there are millions of drops of water, then a wave becomes possible, given right conditions. But we note also that each unit, photon, is at the same time both particle and wave. It is worth noting, says Hoyle, that the shorter the wavelength, the more energetic the individual quanta, photons, become. It is because of this that gamma rays, X-rays, and even ultraviolet light are so destructive of animal tissue, and why radio waves are so harmless. He continues, a further interesting point is that of the vast range of wavelengths from radio waves to gamma rays, only the narrow band from 400 thousandths to 800 thousandths of a centimeter can be detected by the human senses. And he explains, this is not an accident, however, because this is just the range in which most of the sun's radiation is emitted. It is true that the sun does emit some ultraviolet and even some X-rays, but the Earth's atmosphere absorbs such destructive radiation quite strongly, thereby preventing it from reaching the ground. Consequently, there has never been an opportunity for creatures on the Earth to develop senses receptive to these wavelengths. Frontiers of astronomy, Heindel, however, occultists, can and do develop senses receptive to these and other wavelengths, by means of forces operative in the negative pole of the light ether, though it is the scientific aspect of light itself that is most easily observed by the budding occult scientist. All sensory perception belongs to the negative, or passive, aspect of the light ether. Heindel goes on to say that more infrared rays than other rays do reach the ground, due to droplets of water in the air, not vapor, which absorb more visible light than infrared, but infrared does not affect the human eye. Clearly it would be a great advantage to possess eyes that were sensitive to infrared, as indeed I suspect that birds may. This would go far toward explaining the amazing sight that birds seem to possess. Astronomers say that our sun is a yellow or orange star, one of the class known as orange or yellow dwarfs, among the most unstable of stars. Sunlight is therefore not really white, but tinged with yellow or gold, and the light ether is also described by the scientist as golden or yellow, although like sunlight again, it does possess a complete band of colors, visible to ordinary eyesight as color or as light, but visible to etheric sight as vibration and sparkling points of energy. 10. The occultist's view of the light ether. Although all of the four ethers have work to do in every part of the living organism, each ether has one special work of its very own. The chemical ether is the avenue for forces concerned with upbuilding and nourishing the entire body, but its special field of action is the bony structure, or skeleton. The life ether promotes growth activities and the perpetuation of the species. Its special area consists of the blood and other liquids of the body, the generative system, and the endocrine glands. The light ether is the avenue for the cosmic forces related to sunlight, color, and heat, tremendously important in our evolution, but its special area is the nervous system, both voluntary and sympathetic, the pineal gland and the brain as a whole. 10. The occultist's view of the light ether. 24. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Are the seat of the human spirit, ego. The brain is the great central receiving and coordinating center of the nervous system, organizing all sensations as reported from the sense organs by way of the nerves. We noted in our last chapter that the tiny thalamus body is thought to be the original brain, and that instincts and psychic powers still have a focus there, while the upper brain governs all later evolution of sensory powers. Again, we have seen that the life ether specializes the solar fluid which acts as the electricity of the nervous system. Mr. Heindel adds further that the light ether transmits the motive power along the various nerves which enables the ego to move the body. Motive power is not the same thing as the life energy involved in growth and perpetuation of the species, even though it may spring from the same primordial root. Note that the solar fluid also circulates in plants, which already have a rudimentary nervous system and therefore also the beginning of sensory perception. Modern physics offers some clarification on these points in the statement that the photon, the unit of the electromagnetic spectrum, is itself chargeless, although it carries electromagnetic energy. The photons discussed in these lessons on the light ether pertain only to that band of the electromagnetic spectrum which we know as our sun's light. The electromagnetic spectrum extends both above and below this belt. The cosmic fire operative in the light ether has been mentioned. The human ego is part of this fire, and its energies play through the light ether, not as a part of the race complex but as an individual, willing, and thinking spirit, working out its destiny. Max Heindel says that the ego works particularly in the heat of the blood. It is stated in the Cosmo-conception, p. 36, the forces that play along its positive pole, i.e. the light ether, are the forces which generate blood heat in the higher species of animal and in man, which makes them individual sources of heat. These forces also circulate the blood. At the age of 21, when the mind is born throws off its protective sheath, the ego comes into full control of its own bodies, and the blood heat, which during adolescence was often overheated, now is held to somewhere near the norm of 98.6 Fahrenheit. This blood heat is necessary to the ego's consciousness in the body. If the blood temperature falls too far below or rises too far above it, the ego is forced to withdraw from the body, which then falls into the states we recognize as sleep, coma, or death. The ego fire is the fire of the alchemist, which eventually creates the diamond body of the adept. In the cold-blooded animals, it is only the circulation of the blood which is activated through the positive pole of the light ether, the need for heat no being present. In plants, the forces operative in the positive pole of the light ether circulate the juices, and these forces relate to sun heat rather than to sunlight. At the winter solstice, modern research has shown these in the northern hemisphere, even in those climes where ice and snow cover the land. The slight change in the etheric forces when the sun begins to turn northward from its southernmost declination causes the trees to awaken, and the sap begins to move in their roots and deep within their trunks. It is the cosmic heat, dormant in the positive pole of the light ether, that triggers this awakening. The forces which work along the negative pole of the light ether are those which operate through the senses, manifesting as the passive functions of sight, hearing, feeling, tasting, and smelling. They also build and nourish the eye. Cosmo, page 36. To the etheric senses, the various colors are actually tangible as well as visible, and some occult investigators declare that all other sensations have a correlation to light and color. The different wavelengths of color in the beam of sunlight can be felt, and a difference in quality noted. Blind children can sometimes differentiate between colors, although they cannot see them as such. Some physicists speak of a facial vision developed by these children, but about 40 years ago, Dr. Jules Romain demonstrated, and recounted in his book, Eyeless Sight, now out of print, that most portions of the skin could be converted to the use of sight. 10. The occultist's view of the light ether. 25. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Found areas especially sensitive to light were the forehead, cheeks, temples, chest, and hands. Embryologists also say that almost any part of the skin of the embryo can be used to form eyes. Dr. Romain explained this by saying that the skin is studded with small cells, called ocelli, which do in fact resemble miniature eyes. The occultist has always maintained that so long as the light ether is present, any living organism will always develop sensory perception, and especially the perception of light, in some sort of eye structure. The force working along the negative pole of the light ether are those which deposit the chlorophyll and the colors in flowers. All color, in all kingdoms of nature, are deposited, by means of forces working through the negative pole of the light ether. Since we now know that light is not merely waves in an ether but consists also of actual particles, in packets of energy, called the photon, we are in a position to see that there is a definite and real substance which the nature forces can use and handle in this work of depositing color. These nature forces include fairies, angelic beings, and the human ego. Because the light ether is the avenue for the forces which promote sensory perception, and especially the eye, it is usually true that the student's early experience with etheric vision relates to the phenomena of this ether. He generally sees first a sort bluish mist, or cobweb, which seems to fill space, oftenest in a twilight, or in a dimly lit room or hall, or when he is coming from a darker room into a lighted one, say along a corridor. This bluish mist is observed to be in violent motion where the light strikes into it, for it beats with a rapid motion like that of a hummingbird's wings. Later he may see that the beating wings, or cobwebs, of light are full of rainbow colors, in the midst of which innumerable points of silvery light dash to and fro. The stronger the light, the more of these particles are seen, and the larger they appear to be. They dash about in the atmosphere with great energy, appearing and disappearing continuously, but they do not settle toward the ground. Not all of them are basic sunlight, however some have another origin. On closer inspection, the cobweb in space seems to consist of small transparent flakes, with a comet-like nucleus which is the sparkle first observed, the flake as a whole being transparent and filmy. Physicists speak of light as consisting of both waves and particles, that is, the photon itself is both, and the occultist sees this photon in the range belonging to our sun's radiation as described here. The transparent flake would seem to represent the wave aspect of the photon and the spark the particle aspect, and the occultist suggests that the first is negative and the latter positive, but this is tentative. In the human body complex, the light ether is said to be dominantly positive in men and negative in women. Let us see how this works out. The senses and colors belong to the negative pole, and women's sensory responses are often quicker than those of men. They see colors more clearly, and they suffer less from color blindness. Their etheric aura also shows a larger proportion of the golden light ether. The positive energy of the light ether, however, is evident in the dynamic urge to action which characterizes the masculine incarnation, and the masculine aura often sparkles thickly with the energy points belonging to this ether. The man also shows more of the fiery ego drive. Since light is made up of photons, and the photons consist of both waves and particles, both appear together throughout space. In trying to study the light ether, the student should look out not at an object, or against a wall or ceiling, but directly into space itself. The following quotation is of interest. Light ether is a substance of a peculiar type which has no familiar atom mosaic that we usually call matter. We can call light ether a substance, but we can also call it space, keeping in mind that space may possess certain morphological or structural features that make it a much more complicated thing than in the conceptions of Euclidean geometry. In fact, in modern physics, the 10. The occultist's view of the light ether. 26. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Expression: light ether, divested of its alleged mechanical properties, and physical space are considered synonymous. Gamma 123, infinity. It may help the student to observe this ether for the first time if he will lie prone upon a bed and gaze into the corner of the ceiling in a room full of light. His eye will not then come to rest upon a surface, but will rest within space itself, and soon he will begin to see waves and sparkles of the light ether. Eye strain should be avoided. 11. Summary: the three ethers. Before entering upon a discussion of the reflecting ether, let us review the salient features of the three lower ethers as known to physical and occult sciences. First, light belongs to what is called the electromagnetic spectrum, of which only a small segment, or band, is visible to human eyesight, for the reason that this band represents the radiation from our sun, in whose field our senses were evolved. Had our race evolved on a planet belonging to a giant red sun, for example, we might have evolved eyesight in the infrared range. It is a curious fact that when etheric sight begins to unfold, it is the invisible aspect of light in our own solar spectrum that is usually first seen, the actual waves of light themselves, and the nuclei of energy sparkling in the waves. The waves of light ether are actually made up of units, or packets, of energy, which are waves and particles at one and the same time. Both are visible, simultaneously, to the etheric vision. The unit of energy is called the photon, and it is not merely the unit of solar light, but it is the unit of all electromagnetic waves. Photons are packets of energy, says the physicist, which correspond to atoms and molecules, which are packets of matter. Electrons, protons, and alpha particles are particles of electricity. All radiant energy consists of photons. The photon is properly defined as the building block of the electromagnetic field. It travels with the speed of light. The photon is never at rest. The electron, proton, and neutron can be at rest, but the photon cannot be. Hence the electron, proton, and neutron are the units of matter, so called, and in occult terms, packets of the chemical and life ethers, which Max Heindel describes as the stationary ethers. Radiant energy, however, the unit of which is the photon, represents energy which is continuously escaping from matter. Occultly, it is the unit of the light ether. The photon itself has no charge, but it carries electromagnetic energy. Subatomic particles and photons have a spin, and when charged they are responsive to magnetic fields. Astronomers say there are magnetic fields in interstellar space, in which new galaxies tend to form, but the occult scientist also sees a rain of cosmic force, electrical or magnetic in nature, which he calls the colorless solar ether. It is not identical in nature with cosmic forces or with solar and planetary magnetism, but there is a connection of some sort, which has not yet been determined either by mundane or by occult science. The colorless solar ether is subject to the call of the human mind and will. Just as the magnetic fields of space are known to impart spiral activity to certain subatomic particles, usually nuclei, so also the animal magnetism of occult science seems to be accompanied by spiral activity in the life ether, which forms and guides the activities of the chemical ether. The two lower ethers are generally considered together as a working unit, as it is almost impossible to study them separately. Photons are not uniform in magnitude. The amount of energy is in proportion to the frequency. X-rays have frequencies 1,000-fold larger than. Science speaks of bioelectrochemistry and bioelectromagnetism. 11 Summary, the three ethers. 27. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Visible light, so when they give up their energy to atoms, electrons, etc., their punch is greater and more easily observed, the physicist explains. The body structure is formed in the two lower ethers, and the life ether specializes the solar fluid which acts like electricity in the living organism. The solar fluid is converted from inorganic cosmic magnetism to the living magnetism known to occult science and now being researched by physical science. The electrical energy of the solar fluid energizes the nervous systems of the human organism, both voluntary and sympathetic. The two complementary halves that make up every functioning electric circuit have been discovered by biologists. We mention in passing here that the back of the head is found to carry a positive charge and the front a negative charge, and this front portion is termed a silent area, and is supposed to be associated with extrasensory perception. In occult science, the keynote of the vital body is heard humming in the medulla oblongata, and its vibration is often felt in the back of the head. The scientific investigators say that there are three axes of magnetic force to which the human being is subject, and they are testing various patients in hospitals to see if emissions of cosmic rays, magnetic storms on the sun, and other phenomena of the sort have an effect on the nervous condition of human beings. Occult science has taught for centuries that such cosmic conditions, the macro-COSM, do have a reaction in the human organism, the microcosm. Modern science now uses the terms macro-COSM and microcosm as freely as occult science has done in previous ages, but the microcosm of modern physics tends to be the interior of atoms and molecules and not merely the human organism as a whole, at the infinitely large being the macro-COSM and the infinitely small the microcosm. An increased understanding of the light ether will bring about an important new science in the matter of color healing and the use of color in promoting growth in plants and animals. Color therapy is already making great progress, not merely among occultists, but in the world of physics, chemistry, and medicine. It is understandable now, when the nature of light is seen as consisting of particles as well as waves, that color can have a very clear and definite physical effect. Even very serious organic diseases have yielded to color therapy in the hands of experts, not merely nervous and mental, but actual physical disorders. Color therapists believe that a ray of color represents an actual substance, and that vitamins and other elements contain these substances, so that in a very real sense the red ray, for example, may be said to give needed iron to the blood, and so forth. But none of these color deposits could be made in plants without the keynoting or pattern-making activity of the life ether, as we have indicated. At the borderline of the life and light ethers, the strange life substances called enzymes do their work. It has been found that in plants as diverse as apple trees and lettuce there is a light-sensitive enzyme which regulates plant growth at all stages from germination to the ripening of fruit. The government experimental stations, e.g. U.S. Department of Agriculture research in Beltsville, MD, have partially isolated the substance, which is effective in minute quantities, and have reproduced what is apparently its critical reaction in a test tube. The enzyme exists in two forms, and transforms reversibly from one to the other upon exposure to appropriate wavelengths of light. One form absorbs light in the orange to red range, the other absorbs far red light, near the limit of the visible spectrum. The first form triggers such effects as the reddening of apples and the germination of lettuce seed, the other form promotes flowering and regulates growth. The predominant form of the enzyme in the plant depends upon the color of light to which the plant is exposed. Both forms are present in about equal amounts after exposure to light in the middle of the red range. At longer wavelengths the reaction favors the orange-red absorbing form, while shorter wavelengths. 11 Summary, the three ethers. 28. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Toward the yellow, stimulate the production of the far red absorbing form. In the living plant the intensity as well as the wavelength of the light influences the function of the enzyme. The investigators found that soybean plants will flower after an extremely short exposure at night to far red light but will not flower if the intensity of the light is increased 100 times. Exposure at low intensity to the same wavelength stimulates germination in lettuce seed. Exposure at high intensity reduces germination to about zero. Occult science divides the spectrum of light into positive, negative, and neutral areas, with the colors below green called hot, or positive, and the colors above green being called cool and electric, or negative. Green is neutral, but no color is more important, for this is the color of chlorophyll. In color therapy the positive or hot colors are thought of as streaming upward, as if from the earth. The negative or cool colors are thought of as streaming downward from the heavens, while green, the neutral color, draws in its forces horizontally. Green has been proved to be a primary color in the new color science. Whatever may be said of the effects of color on human beings as purely psychological, the same cannot be said of the influences of colored light on vegetation. Some kinds of light promote growth of roots, others of the stems, leaves, and flowers, others the germination of the seed, and so on, while the light-sensitive enzyme in the plant tissue proves to be an important link in the life process. Science has gone down to the far red limit of the spectrum, but has not yet found the peach blossom color known to the occultist. Wavelengths of color will one day be used to open up the spiritual faculties, for as we have shown, these also belong to the light ether forces, supersensory perception as well as common sensory perception being dependent upon this ether, so far as consciousness in the body is concerned. Part IV Reflecting Ether. 12 Between Two Skies. As far back as there is any written record, we find references to reflection and images as illustrating the way in which God's creative ideas become objectified in space and time. Now when we look into a pool of clear waterman's first mirror we see that the sky which is farthest above us is the bottommost part of the reflected scene in the water, while other objects, including ourselves, occupy intermediate positions between two skies. In our study of the reflecting ether, let us keep this image in mind, as neophytes in mystery schools have been doing for many thousands of years. In the Rosicrucian Cosmo-conception, pages 37 and 38, Max Heindel has written, "The reflecting ether deserves its name for more than one reason, for the pictures in it are but reflections of the memory of nature. The real memory of nature is found in a much higher realm. In this reflecting ether no thoroughly trained clairvoyant cares to read, as the pictures are blurred and vague compared to those found in the higher realms. Those who read in the reflecting ether are generally those who have no choice, who, in fact, do not know in what they are reading. As a rule ordinary psychometrists and mediums obtain their knowledge through the reflecting ether. To some slight extent the pupil of the occult school in the first stages of his training also reads in the reflecting ether, but he is warned by his teacher of the insufficiencies of this ether as a means of acquiring accurate information, so that he does not easily draw wrong conclusions. This ether is also the medium through which thought makes an impression upon the human brain. It is most part IV reflecting ether. 29. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Intimately connected with the fourth subdivision of the world of thought. This is the highest of the four subdivisions contained in the region of concrete thought and is the home world of the human mind. There is a much clearer version of the memory of nature is found than in the reflecting ether. He also states that the memory aspect of this ether resides in the negative pole, while thought processes make their impression on the brain by way of the positive pole. He does not say that these poles are magnetic poles, however. The reflecting ether is not electrical, nor is it magnetic. Its positive pole is dominant in the front of the brain, in the area where the silent watcher, divine spirit, has its seat. We are taught further that the reflecting ether is the least dense of the four ethers, that in the growth cycle it ripens at about the age of 28, that it is negative in men and positive in women, that like the light ether it is volatile and migratory, that it is really a hyperether, as much astral as etheric, and even mental, since it is so closely penetrated by desire and mind stuff, and while it appears to be empty at first glance, it hides within its translucent folds many secrets, in a picture record which consists not only of reproductions of physical forms but also of feelings and thoughts. Consequently, when the student seer learns to read in this ether, he may be surprised to discover that he not only sees the moving pictures of past events in his life, but may also sometimes see the auric formations and thought forms which accompanied them, even though he had no clairvoyance at the time the events occurred. Another of the oddities of the reflecting ether, which makes it difficult to assess the value of what is seen there, is familiar to assess the value of what is seen there, is familiar to most students, for Max Heindel has mentioned it often. This is the way in which the time stream of the reflecting ether seems to move backward, so that if it is desired to investigate an event, say, in the year 500, it would be necessary to look first for the year 600, and then allow the record to roll back to the year 500. Yet it is not to be supposed that this reverse flow is comparable to the backward unrolling of a moving picture film strip, in which, for example, the chicken grows back into a chick and then enters into the eggshell which closes around it. It is more in the nature of time pulsations which go back to a certain point and then move forward, according to some as yet undefined law governing the time images. For it is common knowledge among occult students that pictures of former incarnations seem to unfold in a perfectly regular and normal way, at least so far as any one interval is concerned. The exercise of retrospection is recommended for development of time stream vision, with power to regulate the flow of images. Again, the reflecting ether sometimes reverses numbers, so that a number which seems to read 235 may be in fact 532. However, no analogy can be pushed too far, and it would not be true to say that numbers reflected in the reflecting ether are turned backward in the way that mirror numbers are, and as handwriting is. Books and documents seen in the library of the reflecting ether are usually read straightforwardly as in the physical world, but in many instances the reader then suddenly finds that instead of reading a script, he has suddenly plunged into the midst of the story or record, which he views as an omnipresent though invisible spectator. Take note, however, that the supersensory powers vary greatly, according to individual bias and temperament, for just as the physical eye cannot see an object if the eyelid covers the eye, so clairvoyance cannot show anything to the seer unless he definitely and consciously turns his attention in a given direction. Saints of the Church have in many instances achieved clairvoyance, yet saw nothing in the astral world except the thought forms of heaven and hell built up by their own community of faith. Occult students have developed the power to see disembodied spirits, nature forces, and the celestial hierarchies, without ever discovering the nuclear forces known to modern physics, because they did not think to look for them. Part IV reflecting ether. 30. Etheric vision and what it reveals. The pictures in the reflecting ether generally fade away in a few thousand years, leaving holes where the seer can find nothing. In the charged areas of the mystery temples, however, the the elder brothers and their initiates read a clearer version of the memory of nature, which in the fourth or archetypal region of the world of thought, carries all of the records pertaining to our current Earth period, and as these records are reviewed and vivified in the mind of each initiate, the corresponding record in the reflecting ether is, so to speak, reinforced, and continues to be available even to the relatively weak vision of the ordinary clairvoyant or beginning student in the occult school. Again, the teachers on the inner planes will sometimes themselves project into the reflecting ether the pictures they want the neophyte to see and remember, and thus the neophyte sees records which would not otherwise then be available to him. Max Heindel has shown that the light and reflecting ethers are very intimately associated not only in the golden wedding garment, but also in particular functions of the bodily organism. The student may find this closeness of function between these two ethers a source of confusion when first observing them. When once the student seer has begun to see the agitation of the light ether with its wing-like movement and its dashing comets of energy in their filmy packets, he begins to recognize that space is pulsing like the swells of the ocean, in great slow waves. As he looks into these bluish space waves, he begins to see what may at first appear to be colorless transparent forms, sometimes geometrical, but often resembling leaf forms which move in the sea of ether like underwater plants. Then, as the attention continues to focus in these deep tides of light, the student may suddenly realize that he is in fact gazing into the reflecting ether, for behind the moving waves of light his gaze comes to rest upon what seems to be a mirror world, a world with pictures as bright and clear as images in a mirror. There is no movement here, no ripples. The records in the reflecting ether are not easy to read at first sight for the reason that the ether seems so full of them, all of which can be seen through, so it necessitates practice in separating them before each can be read. This is done by the power of the will in holding the attention focused upon one image, not allowing side images to distract the attention. There is a tendency in all undeveloped seers simply to relax and allow these pictures to stream or move past the mental vision, with no attempt to control or analyze them. The ordinary person may indeed never realize that it is at all possible to control the stream of images, and he may even boast of the fact that he cannot turn off the pictures which rush past his eyes. This is the secret of the negative development which may lead to obsession, or if not to actual obsession, then at least to mediumship, and perhaps to a lack of mental and emotional control which medical science would define as unbalanced or disturbed. The student must therefore exercise discrimination as regards the stream of images he sees. It may seem to him that the images are irresistibly self-impelled, but this is not so. They do respond to his will, as he soon discovers when he makes the effort to control them. Note that not all of these images are records. They include, sometimes, actual scenes and real people living on Earth, and again they may include faces and forms of those who have passed on, and scenes of the inner worlds. For this ether may be likened to a two-way mirror, as Max Heindel says, reflecting the outer universe on the one hand and the inner, spiritual worlds on the other. 13. What the reflecting ether reflects. It is often said that every observer colors, by his own mental bias, his observations of the world as it exists both without and within himself. There can be no argument about this. Of course we see the world, we experience the world, through what we are. It cannot be otherwise. But the philosopher of modern science goes beyond this in saying that it is not only that impressions of the outside world depend on his mental bias. 13. What the reflecting ether reflects. 31. Etheric vision and what it reveals. As well as on the individual sensorium seated in the brain, but that the outside or objective world itself is really and literally changed by the act of observation and experimentation, through the interaction of physical forces, and the pressure of mentally generated forces as in telekinesis. How can this be? The answer lies, for the occultist, in the reflecting ether, with its strange mirror-like qualities. It is the archetypal force of the ego, reflecting or projecting into the great root substance of nature, the subconscious mind of the cosmos, which thus affects its world. The reflecting ether, as Max Heindel has shown, extends all through the first heaven, and even through the second heaven, for it contains the principle of memory and it has a special connection with the region of archetypal forces. We may call it the floor of the two lower heavens. When the philosopher of science observes that it may not be necessary any longer to separate subject from object, the observer from the observed, he is expressing the spiritual reality of the archetypal force as known to occult science. Space and time collapse in the realm of the reflecting ether, but the virgin spirit as ego consciousness remains. For the physical scientist, the outward attributes of the reflecting ether are of primary concern. He thinks of worlds and universes of matter which are explained by laws inhering, or reflected, in this subtle plane. But for the occultist, it is the inner universe, reflecting into the reflecting ether, which is of primary importance. And what collapses here is the sense of barrier, the sense of separation, between mankind and the living universe with its innumerable hierarchies, from elemental forces to the one supreme being in whom all creation lives, and moves, and has its continuing existence. Thus Max Heindel's statement that this hyper-ether is a mirror which reflects a twofold reflection, the upper or inner universe and also the downward or outer universe, receives a new application in modern science. We recall further that Mr. Heindel called both light and reflecting ethers migratory and volatile. The reflecting ether, like the light ether, is luminous, and it flows, which is the reason that at a certain point the seer finds it difficult to tell where the one leaves off and the other begins. It has been pointed out that when once the student has learned to see the waves of the light ether, and practices siding into these waves in near darkness when the air seems filled with the pulsing tides of bluish light or mist, his sight comes to rest upon leaf-like forms which float and drift in the watery ether like underwater plants. Here he may see the familiar frost pattern of the winter's window pane, its branches waving in the steady pulsing flow, and after a time he may become aware of the presence of color, and of life moving among the forms. It may be that he sees a little tree, which has the appearance of crystal, moving softly in waves of light, and small transparent winged shapes cluster, like crystal butterflies, upon its twigs. He discovers that when he fixes his attention upon this, it seems suddenly to move in toward him, thus seeming to grow larger, and its colors and details of structure may be studied as if under magnification. But if the attention wanders, all disappears. Although called volatile and migratory, the reflecting ether does present pictures as vivid and clear as those seen in a mirror, so that the student may feel as if he had indeed stepped through the looking glass when he has his first experience with this ether. Looking into the space waves moving in near darkness, he seems to himself to be at the bottom of an ocean of dim bluish light, and the great swells pulsing around him continuously reveal new forms, all of them moving slowly along like objects carried by sea tides. Sometimes he may feel convinced that he can really see, with his physical sight, in this bluish light, and he may fix his eyes upon something in the room, say a picture which he knows hangs in a certain spot. 4a. 13. What the reflecting ether reflects. 32. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Moment indeed it seems that he is really seeing the picture, and then he realizes that instead he is seeing the same omnipresent plant forms, glowing, translucent, and crystalline in the ether. Space is full of patterns, God geometrizes. At this point, gazing into the negative pole of the light ether, the student seer passes insensibly into the vision of the negative pole of the reflecting ether. It is virtually impossible to say when or at what place the boundary has been crossed. Note that these patterns which swim in the light ether shows every indication of being the guide patterns for the elemental forces which construct earth forms. Geometric patterns and also intricate plant patterns of every sort, together with the light forms that work through and with them as beheld here, pertain not merely to records of the past, but directly to the present-day world. It is at the boundary between these two ethers that the archetypal forces mysteriously cross over into the space-time continuum. Here is the point where subjectivity, so-called, becomes objective, and the thought form hovers on the verge of chemicalization. The record inscribed on the seed atom of the heart and in the negative pole of the reflecting ether is only one manifestation of the powers resident in the reflecting ether. It is the specialized record belonging to one individual. The reflecting ether of the planet is the memory of the entire globe, receiving reflections from the planet's own mental envelope, where the record's memories of the living earth spirit are held inviolate and unchanging. Some pictures in the reflecting ether do belong wholly to what we call the past, whether in the subconscious mind of our present embodiment, or in the race subconscious recorded in the seed atom in the apex of the heart, which we carry with us from life to life. All of the past resides in that part of the reflecting ether, which we call the subconscious, both in man and nature, and which can be probed with the right technique. Apropos of which Max Heindel says, George du Maurier had written a story called Peter Ibbetson, wherein this theory of the subconscious memory is very clearly drawn. Peter Ibbetson, a prisoner in an English penitentiary, learned how to dream true, that is to say, by putting his body in a certain position he learned how to lock the currents of ether within himself, so that at night he was able at will to keep in touch with any scene in his past life that he desired to. There he could see himself as a spectator, grown man that was, and he could see himself among his parents and playmates, and in the environment he was in at the time that scene was enacted. He could see the whole scene with many more details than he had been able to observe at the time when the events took place.
There are people on Rumble that are enjoying this. I'm fascinated by this. I didn't get this far into the this book, and so but yeah, he was a Rosicrucian. I've talked about them for years, and that even the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and even the Freemasonry, etc., they're all derived from Rosicrucians, and before them, again, there's been countless groups throughout history that are interpreting astrophysics a little differently, like this cosmos, this earth plane, and follow different rules, etc. But I wanted to show you that people are blaming certain religious groups for things that are going on in the world, and deceivers, and people that have significantly assisted in innovating societies as well. So there are good and bad in every single group, in all societies. Some famous people associated with Rosicrucianism include Sir Francis Bacon, Isaac Newton, Michael Faraday, Benjamin Franklin. And the Rosicrucian Fellowship was founded in Seattle in 1909 by Max Heindel, who I'm talking about right now. And he has a book that I'll share. I'm still going through it, but I'll share it on during one of my live feeds because it's very interesting. And George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Benjamin Franklin, were they Freemasons? He admitted to being one, but was he? Was he connected to Rosicrucians? Was he involved with these groups? Did he collaborate with these? Anyways, who knows? Who knows? They do not believe in the virgin birth of Jesus. Neither do I. I believe that this is an interpretation of the sun's travel path through and along the zodiacal belt, within the sky, within the firmament. I'll share the book that I want to share soon. You can get it free if you go to the Internet Archive. And you obviously want to zoom in if you want to read it. Anyways, the Rosicrucian Mysteries and Elementary Exposition of Their Secret Teachings by Max Heindel, 1865 to 1919. Anyway, I'm going to be very engaged in that book, but I'm currently engaged in the one that I'm sharing now.
Place in this material world, he would have been unable to gain any information concerning the future, but the past had been inscribed upon the tablet of his heart and was, therefore, accessible under the proper condition. Volume I, Q&A, p. 114. Note that the seer does not have to go to the etheric region in order to read the records in the reflecting ether. He does not leave his body or go anywhere. He simply reads from the reflecting ether, which permeates the air he breathes, which has a special connection with the bloodstream and the seed atom in the heart. Max Heindel has said, however, that in his opinion it is necessary to be able to leave the body consciously in order to read in the memory of nature in the fourth region of the world of thought, for this record exists high up in the mental atmosphere of the planet. Although the reflecting ether is largely confined to the past and the immediate present, yet it is also true that coming events cast their shadows before, but by the time these shadows are being cast into the reflecting ether they are on the very threshold of materialization. Clairvoyants often see these reflected shadows of the future in the reflecting ether, their own and others, but they do not see the archetypal forces belonging to the higher level in the world of thought, and which may change these shadows without so much as a moment's notice. The student seer should take note, therefore, that he himself, the ego, active as a thinking, willing being in the mental world, can alter or cancel out any picture seen in the reflecting ether, but he does. 13. What the reflecting ether reflects. 33. Etheric vision and what it reveals. This, not by attacking the matter environment, but by treating through spiritual force and understanding the creative idea behind the picture, which is a property of the world of abstract thought, home world of the human spirit. There are many interesting stories of people who have had flash dreams of pictures of future events, usually those about to happen. Sometimes these have been in the nature of warnings of danger, and acting upon them has saved the seer's life. But in a great number of cases the pictures are not clear enough or complete enough for the seer to be able to plot a course of action, and sometimes they show circumstances over which he has no control. In such cases it is well to remember that the real seat of control is in the archetypal world of thought, from which point the ego works with the subtle forces of nature and controls every situation in harmony with cosmic law. The ego can and does control events which are at the point of materialization and which are, therefore, visible as pictures in the reflecting ether, since it is through the positive pole of this ether that thought makes its impression upon the brain. But let no one become disturbed by the prophecies of fortune tellers or by his own flash pictures and flash dreams, because these pertain to the reflecting ether only, and can be referred back to spiritual forces in the home world of the ego itself, where it holds the reins of power. Now, how is the record made in the first place? Max Heindel says, Volume I, Q&A, pages 113-114. Memory is of three kinds. There is in the first place the record which is made by our senses. These impressions are engraven upon the cells of the brain and we are able to consciously to call them back, yet not always, for this memory is exceedingly unreliable and capricious, and were this the only method of gaining a record of our lives, the law of cause and effect would be invalidate. Our life would not be a sequence of what we have done or left undone in the past. There must be another memory, and this is what scientists have called the subconscious mind. Just as ether carries to the camera of the photographer a record of the surrounding landscape and imprints it upon the sensitive plate to the minutest detail, so the same ether which carries a picture to our eye and imprints it upon the retina carries into our lungs a similar picture which then is absorbed by the blood, and as the blood passes through the heart this record is indelibly inscribed upon the sensitive seed atom which is located in the left ventricle of the heart near the apex. The forces, soul, of that seed atom are taken out by the spirit at death and contains the record of the whole life to the minutest detail, so that, regardless of whether we have observed the facts in a certain scene or not, they are, nevertheless, there. We may add that the third kind of memory is the superconscious memory found in the world of life spirit, which is the Christ consciousness. Cosmo, page 92. As Max Heindel has said that each atom of the body has a film of light and reflecting ether, one sees that this must form, collectively, a sheath or aura. As the ego evolves greater spirituality, it draws more heavily upon the cosmic light and reflecting ethers, and the film surrounding the atoms grows and expands until they enclose the entire body in an extensive aura having very special properties and powers, the golden wedding garment of the initiate. The permanent record of the seed atom goes with the ego from life to life, but the film of reflecting ether on each atom carries a record pertaining to the present life in the body, moment by moment, until death, all of which is focused in the permanent record of the seed atom and carried from life to life. there is but a small amount of the two higher ethers in the average human organism, and this is found chiefly in blood, brain, and nervous system, and it is precisely the enlargement of the light and reflecting ether aura which brings about a stronger and more extensive memory, and one which is better able to focus the pictures. 13. What the reflecting ether reflects. 34. Etheric vision and what it reveals. From the planetary memory of nature, as well as from the seed atom of the heart, medieval philosophers made the surprising deduction that memory was not a part of the mind, just as we now say that it belongs to the subconscious, whence it may be called up, voluntarily or involuntarily. Or as Max Heindel puts it in his camera analogy, the light ether pictures are focused on the film, which is the reflecting ether and permanent record of the seed atom. Since light ether and space are almost synonymous, we see that the pictures in space imprint their images upon the film of the reflecting ether, flowing in two directions, one toward the past, the other toward the future. 14. The reflecting ether and records of previous incarnations. Not only does the reflecting ether contain the records pertaining to daily life, it also contains the records of the hours that are spent in sleep, which in the case of the occultist are hours of great activity. Few students remember the activities of the night hours when as invisible helpers they are working, or studying, in the spiritual worlds. The invisible helpers have a choice of action, and while all of them show an interest in the healing work, some have other fields of activity as well. They attend classes, and also are given the opportunity of visiting the regions of purgatory and first heaven, to observe conditions there. Even after the first initiation, Max Heindel said, his memory was not yet perfect, and required further training. Psychologists used to speak of people as being eye-minded, or ear-minded, or abstractionists, as we may designate the third group, who could recall with no images whatever, of any sort. Incredible as it may seem to most people, there are some who can tell you exactly what they had for breakfast, describe everything that was on the table, and yet insist they do not see any image at all. Possibly this type of recollection without images belongs to the mathematical mind, accustomed to thinking without imagery except mathematical formulas. The occult student who is beginning to awaken upon the inner planes shows similar differences of memory and recall, which are undoubtedly due to just such differences of mental habit and temperament. Some will say to themselves, I was at such and such a place last night and talked with so and so. Yet asked to describe the scene or the person, he cannot do so, having no image at all in his mind relative to the situation. Perhaps in daily life he has the same sort of imageless recollection. To improve memory, it may then be necessary to practice building images in the mind, which the student is to perform every morning upon awakening. If the student is ear-minded, if his auditory responses are acute, he will be likely to recall words and speeches more vividly than images, and if he is eye-minded, and his visual responsiveness is the outstanding quality, he will bring back a memory of scenery, objects, and people. Obviously, artistic people are largely eye-minded, musicians and speakers ear-minded. But those who say they recall experiences without images, either visual or auditory, are nevertheless also placing on record a true recollection. Recent psychological experiments at various universities have brought up the suggestion that forgetting occurs as the result of interference of several memory systems of which the images or items are closely similar. This the contrary of popular belief, which would have it that one remembers more easily things that are similar. In the case of inner plane memories, the unusual events are the most easily recalled, but the continuous life of study and work, night after night, is forgotten, largely, because it resembles our daily activities in many ways. 14. The reflecting ether and records of previous incarnations. 35. Etheric vision and what it reveals. Along with the ability to recall the experiences of the inner planes where the spirit functions during the sleep of the body, provided, of course, that it has any higher interests than those of the body, comes the ability to see the pictures in the negative pole of the reflecting ether, which relate to past incarnations. We are told that these records, in a way not yet definable in scientific terms, are impressed upon the seed atom of the heart and carried from life to life, and these seed atom records are among those which, reflected into the negative pole of the reflecting ether, the student often sees before sinking to sleep and before awakening in the morning. Psychologists call them hypnagogic visions, visions thrown out of the subconscious, in sleep, or near sleep. Since they come during sleep, like dreams, the student is not able to exert any real control over them, but as the soul awareness increases he does acquire control. Most trance vision belongs to the area of hypnagogic vision. In the higher order of clear seeing, however, the person is wide awake, but relaxes into complete stillness by an act of will, and then sees these so-called hypnagogic visions in full waking consciousness, and learns to control and direct them. It is because of the need of complete relaxation that most occult schools in the past were situated in out-of-the-way places, on mountain tops and deep in forests or desert places where the air was clear and pure, and there were only the sounds of nature. Obviously, when students trained in such quiet places went out into the noisy thoroughfares of the towns and cities, they tended to lose their hard-won powers, and had to learn to concentrate in the midst of noise and confusion. The Western Mystery School of the Rose Cross has seen and met this problem. Its training ID designed for the use of the city dweller, and while it may seem to the student that his progress is slow, he would find, if he were to make a retreat to some quiet spiritual haven in the country, that he had actually acquired more power than he had realized, and would compare favorably with the students resident there who had been trained in solitude. It is not to be thought that the sleeping vision carries over into the waking state. The point we are making is that the sleeping state gradually clarifies, or becomes permeated with waking consciousness, and this waking consciousness then covers both the hours of sleep and the hours of waking, and also the intermediate zones where the hypnagogic visions occur. In this clarified, or clear, state the student seer reads in the negative pole of the reflecting ether, and sometimes within that ether he will see pictures from past incarnations, his own and others. There are certain important points to be observed in connection with these visions in the reflecting ether. First, the known characteristics of this ether to transpose some of the images, as in the case of Madame Blavatsky who read a page number backward. The mirror analogy should not. After all, the reflecting ether is not a physical-looking glass. It is a four-dimensional mirror in which the three dimensions of space are experienced by consciousness as a reflection. This means that unlike the mirror image, which is never mixed up with our physical selves but remains apart, we ourselves seem to be taken into the stream of the reflecting ether, so that we stand in the very midst of the events shown taking place there. It is only at first that the pictures rush past like the moving pictures familiar to us on the theater screen. The student at some point will find that he has, himself, entered the scene shown him, and he is likely to assume that he is seeing a picture of his own past incarnation. And this is usually true. The first pictures seen are generally those which pertain to our own past incarnations. However, we may not recognize ourselves scene where many people are shown, and where our sympathies go out to some one character.
I hate to break it up. I really wanted to do a whole video. It's almost done, but I need to go, so I might come on later and finish it up, or I'll finish it up and link it to another masterpiece by Heindel. Anyway, on that note, I have to leave it at that, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.